Hey, warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by a good friend of ours, Paul Fritschner. He does a great job with the Rebound Rundown Podcast. He does a great job looking at all things Cincinnati / Xavier and Bearcats athletics. He's going to be joining me. We're going to talk about just how things have not gone great for Cincinnati and the Bearcats thus far this season. We'll take a look at the Big East landscape. A few teams have been standing out to him as surprises thus far this season. Then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larsium, name does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter /X questions today, everything is powered by Better. That is BETR on Better is making it all the better to be able to dive in on some daily fantasy by just giving you the option to be able to dive in for free. If you're a listener to this podcast, all you need to do is go to betr.app. You type in the promo code of VSimpod, VSIMPOD. That gets you $10 free. You just take a look at a player's stats, determine whether or not they're going to go over or under it. You're all going to go where jurisdictions apply. You're able to have some money line and spread action as well. So they do a great job of making things fun and making things easy. And let's get things all started with taking a look back at everything that we saw in college basketball on Sunday. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
While Iowa State did not cover a mondo spread against Long Beach State, still a very convincing win, 91-60 the final. Long Beach State actually won the second half 40-34. So if you laid the number with Iowa State, a little bit of tough luck there, but Iowa State 11-21 from 3 as Milan Mimosilovic 7 of 9 from 3, 27 points out of him. For Iowa State, they win the rebound battle 45-20. They win the turnover battle 12-14, 14 for Long Beach State, 12 for Iowa State, and Iowa State also had Joshua Jefferson step up for 19 big points in this game, so a nice cruiser of a win for Iowa State. Michigan, they just completely dump truck teams. I mean, at the 39.5 point line that they had against LaSalle, they still covered it with ease. 102-50 the final. They outscored LaSalle 48-17 in the second half as LaSalle 2 of 21 from 3-point range. LaSalle loses the turnover battle 19-10. Michigan wins the rebound battle 40-35 as Ade Mara another double-double, 14 points, 10 rebounds, and he had LJ Kaysen step up off the bench for 13 points. Trey McKinney off the bench, 17 points. Just a barrage for this Michigan team. They continue to just absolutely dominate, and speaking of being able to absolutely dominate, that's what we saw out of UConn, 72-54 the final. Now, Silas Demery did get sick in this game and was doing his best to not throw up on the court. He returned and he still had 13 points. That was a little bit of a funny moment, and what's not funny for DePaul is that they were lively in the first half. They were down 33-30, and then in the second half, things went into the abyss as they went 11 of 21 at the free throw line. So if you took the points, that's a big reason why he did not cover. They lose the rebound battle 40-28 as you had Terrace Reed supply 14 points, 11 rebounds for UConn. UConn did have in this game as well 15 turnovers, but they overcome them and they get the job done. For Florida, they close as about 28.5 to 29.5 point favorites. They persevere over Colgate, 90-60 the final. No shock. Florida, they absolutely dominate on the glass, 49-22 as Ruben Chinyelu and Alex Condon by themselves had a combined 22 rebounds. For Florida, 8-24 from 3. The backcourt has still been shaky, but they do win the turnover battle 13-9, so looks like some brightness coming there. Boogie flying only 7 points in this game, so that was a little bit of an issue on Colgate. They go 11 of 17 from 3, and they still lose by as big of a margin as they do. The big margin of victory of the day in a game involving any teams of importance, that would be Vanderbilt, 98-67. They go on the road and they completely punk Wake Forest. For Vanderbilt, 16 out of 32 from 3-point range. Vanderbilt wins the turnover battle 17-12. They actually lose the rebound battle 34-29, but for Wake Forest, just 4 of 21 from 3-point range. Vanderbilt had Tyler Nickel give the team not quite a nickel, but he gave them 26 big points. Tyler Harris off the bench, he was able to supply 14 points. This team, top to bottom, was able to do a nice job, and Tyler Tanner and Duke Miles, a combined 10 steals between those two guys, so that was huge. This was huge as well. Tennessee, they take down Gardner Webb 94-52 on a lot of closing numbers. Weren't quite able to get there with Tennessee, but still a nice convincing win, and this Gardner Webb team is really awful on defense. Tennessee only 10-31 from 3 points, but they won the rebound battle 50-25. Dwayne Brown only 6 points, but 14 rebounds. In this one, Tennessee wins the turnover battle 13-9. This was just complete and utter domination, and J.P. Estrella off the bench was able to supply the team with 10 points as well. For Gonzaga, unable to cover, but they do get the win out there in the state of Oregon over the Ducks, 91-82 the final. This was a game actually played in Portland, and for Gonzaga, 10-23 from 3-point range. They won the turnover battle 11-5. They actually only won the rebound battle 35-33, so Oregon was able to hold in there thanks to Nate Biddle supplying the team with 20 points, 9 rebounds. He goes 3 of 8 from 3-point range, and for Oregon, they go a perfect 13 of 13 at the free throw line to be able to get that cover, but still for Gonzaga, Graham Ike, a nice double-double, 17 points, 11 rebounds. Braden Huff, he puffed, he gave the team 20 points, and off the bench, Braden Smith, 7 assists, 21 points. He was able to go 7 of 10 from the floor, so Gonzaga still looking quite beastly out there. You had a beastly performance from Kennesaw State in the second half as Alabama was up 54-28 at the half. Looked like they were going to run and hide with the cover, but Kennesaw State outscored Alabama 53-38 in the second half. Not good enough for the outright win, but 92-81 final in this one for Alabama. Just 10-31 from 3-point range. You did have Aiden Hallway supply 17 points, and Aiden Sherrill, he was able to give the team 21 points himself, but Kennesaw State is able to hold in there because they won the rebound battle 46-41, and for Kennesaw State, they do lose the turnover battle 16-8, and this is not an Alabama team that generates a lot of turnovers, but they did have 3 different players, Ramon Seals, Franquan Sherman, and RJ Johnson, all supply double figures off the bench, and Simeon Cottle, 20 points. So if you took the points out there, you were able to get there. If you took the points with North Dakota, you were able to get there as well. Nebraska was actually trailing 26-24 at the half. They do get the job done. Nebraska does 78-55, but unable to cover that right around about 30-point spread. Nebraska just 6 of 27 from 3-point range. Rink Mass only played 21 minutes, 7 points, so rather pedestrian performance out there. Nebraska does win the rebound battle, though, 42-30, and for Nebraska, against a North Dakota team that's been solid at generating turnovers, just 6 turnovers in this game, but a little bit of cold shooting, and for North Dakota, they do go 10 of 29 from 3-point range, with Eli King supplying 13 to be able to get the cover there. In terms of games involving not ranked teams, if you, like me, had Clemson, man, that is rough. They were up 38-11. They closed about 3.5 or 4-point favorites, and we'll talk a little bit more about Cincinnati on the flip side with Paul Fritschner, but 68-65 the final as Cincinnati, from the point that they were down 38-11, they outscored them by a count of 54-30, but not enough in this game as Cincinnati does go 10-25 from 3-point range, and they did have Day Thomas supply 17 points for Clemson. They lose the rebound at 36-27, but they do go 10-20 from 3-point range, and for Clemson, they played even up in the turnover battle 12-12, but after they got off to that big giant lead, they pooped their pants after that, and you did have for Clemson, despite that, 6 different players score at least 7 points, which is pretty incredible considering they only scored 68 points in the game. You saw UMass Lowell just lose another game, 88-76. Boston U, they get the job done with a win and cover, and Pittsburgh just absolutely punks Penn State 80-46 a final. It's a Penn State team that just has not been able to get a lot going outside of really Freddie De Leon, 23 points. He had half the team's points and he didn't even start in this game. The starters for Penn State, by the way, a combined 18 points in this game. They lose the rebound battle 42-30, and for Penn State, how about 12 of 24 from 3-point range, with Roman Supala being able to give you 20 big points, so they were able to get the job done with a nice win. Hofstra, depending upon your closing number, may or may not have been able to cover for you, 74-66 the final. They're coming off of a nice win over Syracuse, and Cruz Davis just continues to cruise to big performances. He was able to spy 27 points, and for Quinnipiac, just 5 of 24 from 3-point range out of them. You saw in a little bit of later action, Zot, the Anteaters, get a win, but no cover on right around about 1.5 points, 74-73 the final for Irvine. They do lose the rebound battle 41-29, but this continues to be a team that has been able to do a pretty rock-solid job defensively and forcing North Dakota State into 19 turnovers. So they did a very solid job finding a way to be able to persevere there. The UAB defense looked very solid on Sunday, 72-47. They get the win and cover against UNC Asheville. As Asheville, they were a load of Asheville. 13 turnovers. UAB has been very good in terms of taking care of the ball, just 5 turnovers of their own. UAB has been rough with their three-point shooting, just 4 of 13 from the outside. But Kyron Lindsey comes in off the bench. He gave the team a nice boost with 24 points. So nice, easy winner from them. You saw New Mexico State be able to get a nice win over Sam Houston State, 87-78, the final in this one. As for New Mexico State, they've been a very rock-solid defense over the last few years. Did give up a little bit in the second half, and they lost a rebound battle, 43-35, but 9-24 from the outside. Off the bench, Jalen Randall and Elijah Elliott. They were able to combine for 34 big points, so they did a nice job finding a way to be able to get the job done out there. And for Manhattan, it's been a little bit of a rough season defensively for them, and they give up 81 points to a Presbyterian team that's in the bottom 5 of the country in terms of total possessions brain, but they find a way to persevere, 87-81 the final. As for Manhattan, you had a combined 36 points out of Jaden Winson and Devin Ninkins, 2 rock-solid players. They're still dealing with Will Sidner being out due to eligibility concerns, but they find a way in that one. And for Loyola Maryland, they were about a 24-point underdog. They actually led George Mason at the half. They do not get the outright win, but nice quality cover, 86-79. The final, George Mason is able to find a way despite going 5-19 from 3 because they went 27-34 at the free throw line. They had Corey Mincy on their side. He was able to supply 26 points, and for George Mason, they win the turnover battle by a count of 10-7, but Loyola Maryland looking a little bit more pesky in that game, and this one was a very pesky one as well, if you bet it. As for Maine, well, they have been getting Maine. They have scored 65 points or fewer in all but one of their games against Division I competition this year. Drexel absolutely put nail to hammer, 74-56 the final. As for Maine, 2 of 13 from three-point range. For both teams, they had 13 turnovers, but Drexel all of a sudden 14 out of 29 from three-point range for a team that really doesn't shoot at the world's greatest from three-point range. TCU has been all over the place this year, 80-56. They get the job done against Florida A&M, but they were actually trailing at the half in this game. They pull away 56-28 in the second half. Not enough to be able to cover, though. As for TCU, they go 11 of 31 from three-point range. They did have Xavier Edmonds be able to step up with 21 points, but certainly interesting out there. And then for another team out there in the great state of Texas, Texas A&M 118-77. They absolutely take it to East Texas A&M, and for Texas A&M, 14 out of 28 from three-point range. Rashawn Agee was able to supply 21 points, and I mean, it was just a collective effort for this bunch as you had 9 different guys be able to supply at least 7 points. So the Aggies, they had themselves a nice quality day out there, and Wichita State, a nice quality day out of them, 88-57. They take down Eastern Kentucky, who looks like they might be in for a little bit of a rough year, with Wichita State having Karan Boyd be able to go off for 22 points. For Wichita State, 12 of 28 from three-point range. I know that Paul Mills talked after the game that he had a episode where he very nearly died. So you feel good that he's out there doing what he loves and that he's still with us, obviously. But that said, this is a Wichita State team that they really look like they've been able to find it in year number 3 under him. So nice, good win there, and good to hear that everything's all good with him. And for Oregon State, things were good with them. As a double-figure underdog, they go on the road. They get the job done against Arizona State by a count of 78-75. Arizona State goes just 4 of 19 from three-point range, and for Oregon State, it's been rough going for them on the glass, but they win that rebound battle 39-29 as Ode Diaz-Graham, who comes over from Pittsburgh. He had been doing a nothing burger all season long. 9 points, 9 rebounds, exactly what they needed on the boards. And then for Josiah Lake, 12 of 12 at the free throw line, 23 points, 9 assists, did have 4 turnovers, but Oregon State, they get a nice winner out there. And for Cal, another former Pac-12 team, they find a way to be able to get past Columbia, 74-56 the final. Columbia has been a top 25 team with their three-point shooting percentage, just 4 of 17 on this day, and Columbia, they've got turnover concerns, 15-6. They lose that turnover battle as Day-Day Ames, he continues to lead the way for Cal. He was able to supply the team with 21 points. South Florida, a nice quality winning cover over UMBC, 94-69 in the final as Isaiah Nelson, double-double, 20 points, 11 rebounds, and the mighty Osprey of North Florida have not been having a good time of it. They do not cover against Miami, and they give up another 100+, 105-67 the final. As for Miami, you had in this game Trey Donaldson supply 21 points, Shelton Henderson was able to give you 20 points himself, and for North Florida, they are one of the worst defensive rebound rate teams I have ever seen in my life. They had as many defensive rebounds as Miami had offensive rebounds. They lost that rebound battle 44-24. So for Miami, nice clean domination out there and a very dominant performance as well out of Minnesota. They absolutely take it to Campbell. This by a count of 78-50 as for Campbell, unable to really take care of the ball. 17 turnovers on 16 made field goals. Meanwhile, for Minnesota, they were able to shoot 58% from the floor. Towson continues to be tremendous for the team. 24 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. And for Minnesota, they appear to get things rocking and rolling right now. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're seeing in college basketball right now, the totals have been very split between overs and unders. As a matter of fact, 979 unders to 978 overs. About as 50-50 as it gets. You've had a few pushes along the way as well. And favorites continue to cover at about 50.6%, 985, 960, and 33 against the spread. Meanwhile, if you take a look at the last 7 days in college basketball, it has been a very overwhelming last 7 days. 135 overs to 112 unders, with favorites covering at only about 47.5%, 116, 128, and 5 against the spread. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we're seeing trend-wise. Coming next, but if we do talk with our good friend Paul Fritschner, who does an amazing job out there in the great city of Cincinnati with the Rebound Rundown Podcast, and so much more right here on Cuz Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word, .com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cuz Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man as we've got Paul Fritschner aboard. He does a great job at a wide variety of different stops and with a wide variety of things. He does a great job over at the Field of 68, the Big East Digital Network. I know that he does the Rebound Rundown Podcast, which wherever you find this fine podcast, you should be able to get that great podcast as well. He's a man that is based out there in the lovely city of Cincinnati, doing an amazing job taking a look at this great sport of college basketball. And you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first and last name, Paul Fritschner. And with regards to that last name, Fritchner. And Paul, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Absolutely, Greg. Let's talk hoops.
Absolutely. Let's dive in. And Paul, you are out there in the great city of Cincinnati, and we saw it on Sunday. Cincinnati actually came back from down 27 points. So anyone that laid the points with Clemson, that was a rough one, and I'm one of those people. But that said, how do we take a look at the situation in Cincinnati? Because, I mean, even though it was a spirited effort in the second half, it was still a loss. They lost that game to Eastern Michigan, and it just feels like there's a little bit of dysfunction right now with the Bearcats in what is going to be a brutal Big 12.
I don't think it's a little bit, Greg. I think we're to the point now with this Bearcats team where their only significant win in the non-conference is over Dayton. A win against Dayton at home at Fifth Third Arena. Look, Dayton just lost to Liberty. That Dayton win for Cincinnati is really nothing to write home about. Now here we are talking yet again about Wes Miller and Cincinnati trying to get over the hump, trying to get this team into the NCAA tournament. And if we're just calling it like it is, Greg, I don't think it's going to happen this year because they don't have any wins to speak of for their non-conference resume. That means they're going to have to play their way in Big 12 play. And I just don't see it happening. I don't see this team flipping the switch after what we've seen in the non-conference, just suddenly in the Big 12 doing enough to get into the NCAA tournament. Could it happen? Sure. The Big 12 is one of the best, if not the best conferences in the country this year. There's no doubt that the wins are available for them. The best example is Houston coming up right away on January 3rd. The problem is Can they win those games? They have shown us nothing so far to prove that they can win at home, losing to Eastern Michigan, or on the road, or at a neutral. Nothing. And so from that perspective, it's really hard for me to sit here right now on December 21st and be convinced that Cincinnati can all of a sudden turn it around and make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's a team that I've been feeling just bad about in general as well. And how much do you think it's a detriment that Wes Miller just continues to insist that his team play up tempo? Because that's what I think is the biggest issue with this team. The defense has actually been really good for Cincinnati, but he said before the season that he wanted his team to play up tempo. It clearly has not worked, but he keeps doubling down on tripling down at what I think is a bad system on offense.
Yeah, you're right. The thing is, Greg, they've never been a good offensive team under Wes Miller. There have been years where they have been serviceable, but if you really dive into how Cincinnati plays, if you watch their games, if you watch how this team operates on offense, they've always been a really good defensive program. You think back to the days of Bob Huggins and Mick Cronin. They've always prided themselves on the defensive end, but on offense, it's been a slog. They try to sometimes grind you down. They try to win some of those low-scoring games. And then for Wes Miller to come in, to his credit, has tried to change some things. The thing is, looking at this roster this year and the money that they spent, 8 figures on this roster this year, they should not be performing to the record that they've turned out so far in the non-conference. They have spent way more money on this roster than the wins that they have earned so far in the non-conference. And by wins, I mean literally just Dayton, because that's all they have to speak of for their resume right now. So I think the frustration is that you get to this point where you're looking at Big 12 play and there's not really a whole lot that you can point to, and the offense has been the issue. Look at what was the score, 28-3, 27-3 before Cincinnati really got it rolling.
38-11 at one point.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, that was one of those games where when you have a team in the lead 38-11 and they don't cover the spread, you feel a little bit salty about that. I do have to throw that in there, but yeah, it's not been great for Cincinnati, to say the least. As Paul Fritschner, who does a great job with the Rebound Rundown Podcast, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And as we know, out there in your neck of the woods, it is Big East country, and I would say that it's been a mixed bag for Xavier this year. Obviously, unlike what we're seeing with Wes Miller, you're not going to put Richard Pitino on the hot seat in year number one. You figured that there was going to be a little bit of strife, but what have you seen out of Xavier thus far this season? Because they take that rough loss to Creighton a few nights ago where things just all went wrong, and then they were a part of the infamous water bottle game against Georgetown. They go on the road, they get the job done, and they get Ed Cooley reprimanded for a game because he was angry and threw a water bottle at a child, which that's something I did not expect to see. But for Xavier, it does feel like this team is starting to find their bearings a little bit more on offense. It does feel like there's probably going to be a lot of strife this season, but I think that there's been both some good and some bad with this team thus far.
Yeah, I think all of the credit for the success that Xavier has had this year goes to Richard Pitino. And you look at what happened after the Santa Clara game back in the early part of November, the second week of the season. Xavier starts 2-0. Santa Clara comes into the Cintas Center and absolutely wipes the floor with Xavier. And then they go to Iowa the last day of the week, Friday of that week, and they say, look, it's still a 19-point loss, the same as Santa Clara, but it was a different kind of 19-point loss than what they had to Santa Clara. And I say that because it just felt like that game against Iowa, you could see some of the things that started to build then after that, where you go down to Charleston, you lose by 1 to Georgia, where, look, that Georgia game, Xavier probably should have won that game. Georgia only made 1 3 in the second half up until that last 3 of the game, ended up making 2 threes, and the second one was the game winner. To where if you beat Georgia, all of a sudden you're talking about a team that's kind of done something in the non-conference, right? You come back, you beat Cincinnati. It's part of a 5-game winning streak. You beat West Virginia as well. And I know West Virginia's in the first year of their head coach, Ross Hodge, too. But at the same time, I really think that when Richard Pitino and this Xavier coaching staff made the change to go to all Wright at the 1 as the starting point guard of this team, and to go to Jovan Milicevic at the 5, where you can change this lineup up and you can get some more scoring, and maybe you're sacrificing a little bit on size and defensive ability, but you're trying to go more on the offensive side to where maybe the best defense is a good offense, and it worked out really well for you. And I thought the Creighton game the other night that you mentioned, Greg, was very similar to the Santa Clara game. And that's why I was not surprised that Xavier won at Georgetown, to where they got punched in the mouth against Santa Clara, and then they responded after that. They got punched in the mouth by Creighton, the worst loss in the history of the Cintas Center. You could go down the stats. I mean, the most points that an opponent had ever scored in the Cintas Center, the worst margin of defeat that Xavier had ever suffered at the Cintas Center. You could go down the list, but what do? They respond with Richard Pitino's first Big East win in the next game just a couple of days later. And I think that speaks to the way the coaching staff is able to get a lot out of this team. They're not the most talented team. They're not the most athletic team, but they're a group of really high character guys who can go out there and win games because of their effort. And they showed that at Georgetown.
Yep, absolutely. And it's just been very interesting to see what we've gotten out of the Big East this season, because it feels like there have been a lot of surprises outside of your main two. Like with St. John's, even though they lose that game to Kentucky, I think that they're going to be there when it's all said and done in terms of Big East hierarchy. And many of us thought that UConn was going to be that top team. I don't think that there's been anything to suggest otherwise, unless if you've seen something. But I mean, other than that loss to Arizona, they have been rock solid. But I look at the rest of the Big East, and you figure that it was going to be a little bit of a hodgepodge, and I did think that people were sleeping on Butler coming into the season. I've liked what I've seen out of them, but it's looking like that tier number 2 is probably going to be involving teams like Seton Hall and Butler, and I think that Seton Hall has been one of the best stories in all of college basketball this year.
I agree, and I think Seton Hall going a little bit shorthanded on the road to Providence on Friday night. That was a great win for Seton Hall to show that, hey, look, it's Big East play now. We can still win a game on the road and Providence hasn't been anything special either this year, but still to be able to win on the road in college basketball, it's always hard. And then for UConn, St. John's has struggled. You look at what happened yesterday against Kentucky, and I know Kentucky got Jaden Quaintance back, and Jalen Lowe got hurt, then he comes back. And I understand that, but still, that's a game that St. John's would have really liked to have on a neutral floor in Atlanta. UConn, they are the team in the Big East right now that's holding everybody up, because they are the national championship contender out of the Big East. And can the rest of the conference hold its weight this year? I mean, St. John's is going to be an NCAA tournament team, but can the Big East get more than 3 bids? I mean, right now, Greg, the way we're sitting here, the Big East might be a 3-bid conference.
Yeah, I mean, that's stunning. And Seton Hall is probably the best team outside of St. John's, along with UConn, in terms of being able to vie for an NCAA tournament bid. And how do you take a look at the rest of the conference? Because I'm a man from the great state of Wisconsin, and I think that we would both agree it has been a struggle for Marquette this year, and I keep saying it on social media, and I feel like a lot of people are agreeing with me. Shaka Smart, it is not a crime to utilize a transfer portal in this day and age, but I mean, that has been a big disappointment, and that's a big reason why this team has suffered a little bit. But I did mention Butler. I do like what I've been seeing out of them, and it does feel like there's going to be some plucky teams out there in the Big East, but I think the question is, outside of Seton Hall, outside of the main 2 teams, who's going to be able to separate themselves and perhaps go on a little bit of a run, whether that be a team like a Villanova, or whether that even be a team, as strange as it is to say, as a team like a Creighton, who has been suffering a little bit this season as well, but seems to be coming on.
Yeah, I think Villanova might be the answer there, and I think there's a point to be made about Marquette, because the way that Marquette has branded themselves this year is, and Shaka Smart and his stubbornness not to use the portal. Greg, there are plenty of teams, Michigan State, Purdue, teams that don't necessarily build their entire roster out of the portal that have plenty of retention. Look at Purdue, a national title contender.
And even those teams, though, they pick like 1 or 2 good
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. You're able to complement your roster, but still have a ton of retention. And instead, Marquette has taken on this mantra and this brand of, we are not going to use the portal. And there's plenty of space to just add one piece, give Chase Ross some help, right? And so that's where I would say, if you're a Marquette fan, it's just really frustrating that it's not only become what you are as a team, but it's just part of the brand of the program now. And there are ways to get around that. And just 1 player, 2 players, it's not like you have to build the whole team. But yeah, I would say Villanova would be my answer. Villanova or Creighton, maybe. The problem with Creighton is they haven't done a whole lot for themselves in the non-conference. So maybe Villanova is the answer. They had a great win the other night against Wisconsin. So maybe the answer there is Villanova. But could a team like Creighton do enough in Big East play? I mean, look at what they did to Marquette. Look at what they did to Xavier to really inspire some hope for the Blue Jays. And, Jackson McAndrews out for the season. They've been hurt. But, Greg McDermott, I interviewed him after the game at Xavier, and he said, look, maybe I just needed to be more positive with this group. Maybe I needed to motivate them differently. And sure enough, it worked out. You win by 41 in your first game. You win by, 20 plus against Marquette. It's an inspiring effort for Creighton after a disappointing non-conference.
Yep, absolutely. And to the point of Marquette as well, perhaps the best player that Shaka Smart has had at Marquette is the lone guy that he brought in by the transfer portal, which that actually makes it all the worse. So, Yeah, that's just not great to say the least. But certainly we're seeing some encouraging signs out of Villanova, ironically enough, in the great state of Wisconsin, getting that win as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how they blossom, as we do have Paul Fritschner, who does a great job with the Rebound Rundown podcast, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And we already talked about one of the surprise teams in all of college basketball this year. That'd be Seton Hall. I think anyone that doesn't have them on their top 10 or top 5 surprises in all of college basketball is really sleeping on that team. But for a few other teams that you take a look at thus far in the early part of the season that you just have been pleasantly surprised on, and you're wanting to see what they do a little bit more moving forward into conference play, because they have been able to have perhaps a little bit of a better than expected start.
I'm going to go into the mid-major ranks. I really like St. Louis this year. I think Josh Schertz and what he's been able to do at St. Louis has been a lot of fun. Ishan Sharma, Trey Green, Robbie Avila.
Avala's not even their top scorer, by the way.
Exactly. And everybody, that's the name you would recognize. And Avila is not even the most productive player on that team. So, you're looking out of the A10, Dayton's probably not going to be an NCAA tournament team this year after they lose to Liberty the other night. What is the A10? Well, it might be St. Louis. It might be Josh Schertz. I had a chance to talk to Josh Schertz in the offseason, and they were really excited about this team, really excited about what they were bringing back and building at St. Louis. And year 2, Josh Schertz. Year 1 doesn't always work for Schertz, but year 2 and beyond seems to be where things really turn around for him. And sure enough, it's happening again at St. Louis. So that's one of my picks, I would say, would be St. Louis. At the mid-major ranks. I've really liked what I've seen out of them.
Oh, I have as well. It's going to be interesting to see what we get out there in the Atlantic 10. And with St. Louis, need to cut down on the turnovers a little bit, but past that, they're really doing a great job in all facets of basketball. So they're going to be a fun team to watch. And I know that you are doing an absolutely amazing job keeping your finger on the pulse of all things college basketball, because you're dialed in on everything that's happening with Xavier and Cincinnati out there in your fine city. But additionally, on the Rebound Rundown podcast, you do a great job of looking at a little bit of everything college basketball, and then you're mixing and matching out there with the Big East Digital Network, Field of 68, and so much more. So love to get people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. The Rebound Rundown is the best way to find me. That's what I do every single day. That's the podcast I dedicate the most time to. I've done some broadcasts on the Field of 68. That's mainly just play-by-play that I do with them, and I'll end up doing some play-by-play on CBS Sports Network here coming up in a little bit on the CAA, and have done some play-by-play ESPN Plus, stuff like that in the Big East. But my podcasting and what I do every day, what I dedicate the most time to is the Rebound Rundown, and it's available on all audio-based podcast platforms. Interviews and stuff go out to YouTube as well. But it covers Midwest hoops mainly. If you're not a Midwest hoops fan, that's fine. I do mostly national stuff as well, kind of mix and match both of it, all in the Rebound Rundown. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. It's always great talking to you.
Absolutely. Paul, one of the better minds that you're finding all of college basketball, does a great job with his play-by-play work, does a great job being able to take a look at this great sport, the big conferences and the small ones. He covers them all. So a big thanks to Paul for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots. Here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Paul Fritschner. He does such excellent work over at the Rebound Rundown Podcast, 1831 Media. I know that he's doing some work with the Big East Digital Network. We've seen him on the Field of 68 and so much more. So a big thanks to Paul for joining me in the live segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81, and we are good to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games involving teams from the bigger conferences first, along with the Sun Bowl Invitational. They put Norfolk State in the normal Las Vegas betting board today. And then these are the teams with just any one of the teams involved in the matchup that go into the extra games. This includes teams from the America East, the Patriot League, the MEAC, the SWAC, the Northeast Conference, the Big South, the Southland. I believe that I've got them all. If I did not say America East, America East. So let's get things started. 803, 804 on the card. Sacred Heart is on the road against Towson. Towson is a 9.5 to a 10.5 point favorite. 142.5 to 144.5 is the total. And I did set Towson here as a 12.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number. I know that Towson has had a few rough ones going against Central Florida along with Kansas, but I do think that they are going to be able to restore some order, as this is still one of the better defensive teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball. At home, they've been a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Overall, 193rd. That's mainly because they're giving up 19.7 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and if nothing else, you know that they're going to get their slow, distinct style. Towson, 363rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Sacred Heart plays fast, but not necessarily gunning it. 110th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Sacred Heart has been a good three-point shooting team, despite the fact that Anquan Hill, who shot so well from three last year, has been quite off with his game. Anquan Hill still giving you about 15 points, 6 boards, but he's down to shooting about 22.5% for three. Niall Rothbeyer, he's shooting 49% from the outside with 14 points. Sean Gittins, he's getting it with about 16.5 points. He's been able to shoot 39% from three-point range, and as a whole, Sacred Heart has been a top 100 team with their three-point shooting percentage at 36%. It is a unit that has been a top 225 team in terms of rebound percentage, but they get sloppy with the ball with the turnovers outside the top 250 in terms of ball security, and they give up a whole bunch of threes outside the top 310 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a Towson group that they've still been able to do a nice job with their guards, with Dylan Williamson, Tyler Tejada combining for about 32.5 points per game. Not a great three-point shooting team. They shoot less than 30% as a collective outside the top 3 internationally, but they've been a top 100 team in terms of guarding the three-point arc. And for Towson, this has been a top 50 team in terms of rebound percentage and a top 35 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Not a defense that's going to put you under duress outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they should be able to own the paint with Jack Dumbia, give you 11.5 points, a little bit over 5 rebounds at a steal and a half per contest. You've had good production out of Jaquan Womack, who's been able to come on strong with about 5.5 points, 3.5 boards, comes in off the bench, gives his team a spark, as has Jaden Cole, who's been able to shoot 39% from three, was dealing with a little bit of injury towards the beginning part of the season, should be all good to go here. He's had 21 points in the last 3 games, so he's showing that he's all good to go, and I do think that Towson going to be able to get that slow, distinct style where you just don't get a lot of free throws in their games. They're a top 30 team in terms of not putting you on the free throw line, bottom 50 team in terms of free throws attempted per possession. So I think that you get a slog of a game. I set my total at a 138.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 12 here with Towson. 805, 806 on the card. Seattle's on the road against UTSA. Meet the Roadrunners are an 8.5 point home underdog. 142.5 to 143.5 is that total line. With Seattle, I did set them as a favorite of 9 points. Not willing to go past an 8.5, but I'm going to be one to lay it. This is a Seattle group that you do have to fear a little bit of a letdown after that massive win over Washington, and hopefully they don't have guys trying to block shots with their shoe anymore. But that said, for Brandon Maldonado, when he's not trying to block shots with a shoe, he's giving you 16 points, 4 rebounds. I can't find the video of him trying to block the shot with his shoe, but still, just absolute gold if you saw it. He's shooting 44% from three-point range, 97% at the free throw line, so he's been solid there. It's a Seattle team that is typically relatively slow and controlled. They're more mid-tempo this year, about 177th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. While UTSA, you'd expect them to be a little bit faster than what they are, only about 101st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but mainly because they only have one main scorer right now, as they bring in from Southern Utah a nice 16 point per game guy in Jameer Simpson. As a matter of fact, 18.5 point per game guy, 5 boards, shooting 38% from three. Nobody else on this roster is giving you more than 8.4 points per game, and as a collective, they're outside the top 310 with their 3-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 310 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. They're grabbing offensive rebounds. UTSA, a top 100 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but a bottom 50 team in terms of of allowing second and third chances. To this team's credit, they've been a little bit better in terms of guarding the three-point line. They're still only about 268th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, mainly because they're giving up all those second and third chances, but they're not allowing a lot of good looks from three. And this has been a Seattle team that after last year, they were outside the top 280 with their three-point shooting percentage. They're shooting just a hair below 40% this season. UTSA, when they've been at home, they've actually allowed opponents to shoot 39% from three. That goes down to 32% in a road/switch-core venue, but I do think that this normalizes a little bit for Seattle, as right now you've been able to have Will Hembold along John Suckyo. Both shoot about 36% from three. They're combining for about 26.5 points per game, and it's been really amazing what we've been seeing out of Jojo Murphy, shooting about 43% from three-point range as well. I do think that even though Seattle should see a little bit of regression with that three-point shooting, the fact that they're a top 55 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and they're doing a much better job down low, that allows them to get the job done in Seattle. Top 40 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Did set my total at a 145. I do think the UTSA is going to look to crank up that tempo a little bit more, so I'm in on the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 8.5 with Seattle. 807, 808 on the card. Tulsa is playing goes to Denver. Denver is looking to pioneer cover as an 18.5 to an 18.5 point dog. 166.5 to 167.5 is that total. And with Tulsa, I set them as a 20.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. For Tulsa, this is a team that doesn't necessarily play super duper up tempo, but they've just been really efficient. And Denver's not necessarily a team that's looking to gun it either. Denver's about 218th of the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Tulsa just a half a notch behind at 235th. But this is a Tulsa team that has just been absolutely superb. And with Denver allowing teams to shoot 41.9% from three-point range, that is second worst in all of college basketball. This is a Tulsa team that should be able to get a lot of clean looks, as it's been Miles Barnstable has been able to step up with over 14 points. Comes over from St. Thomas after he was rock solid there. For Tulsa right now, they are 12th overall in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. If you look at their home games and their home games alone, though, they actually lead the country with this regard. And with Barnstable, you bring in David Green, who was very rock solid over at Rhode Island last year. He's been able to supply the team with about 13 points. He's only shooting 30% from three after last year. That was 40+%, but he's been able to supply about 5 rebounds per game. And then with Barnstable, he also gives you a pair of assists per game. Tylen Riley has really been able to come on strong recently. He's up to 52% three-point shooting. Should see a little regression there. Barnstable's 45%, I actually think, might be able to be a mainstay, but on top of that, you've got someone like a Romad Dean, 4.5 boards, 7 points. He's been able to shoot over 40% from three-point range, and it's a Tulsa team that they themselves are outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but they've been doing a great job down low as well. Tulsa's become a top 50 team with regards to rebound percentage, top 100 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. And with Denver, while I love what Tim Bregstatter has been able to do, coming on up from MSU Moorhead at the Division II ranks, and he's been able to get this team to play some very efficient offense. Carson Johnson, 17.5 points. He shoots 45% from three. Team as a whole, they shoot over 38% from three-point range. They've been a top 30 team in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. If you look at just raw points scored on a per possession basis for Denver, this team is checking in the top 110. But that said, they just don't have anything down low. Right now, they are outside the top 225 in terms of rebound percentage, outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. Jeremiah Burke has been able to give you 5.5 boards, 15.5 points per game, and then you've got Gabe Oldham, who's been able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. Those are the lone two guys on the roster, give you over 3.8 rebounds per game. So even though you've got Logan Kinsey supplying like 12.5 points, shooting 40% from three, I do think that this is going to be a game where this Tulsa team is going to be able to win from the inside. I do think that there's going to be lots of good three-point shots to be had. I did set a total of 164.5. Again, these are two relatively mid-tempo teams, and I do think that Denver giving up 41.9% for three sees a little bit of positivity, but won't lay up to 20 with Tulsa, and I'm going to be in on the under. 809, 810 on the card. It is Western Illinois, and they play us to SIU Edwardsville. Edwardsville is a 5.5 point favorite total on this game. It is 136.5 to a 138.5, and I made a total of a 133. So I'm going to be in on the under. You've got an Edwardsville team that has been able to do a very good job with regards to their defense. They have left a lot to be desired on offense. As for Edwardsville, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they're about 265th in all of college basketball. But Western Illinois, 325th. And for Western Illinois, if you look at their home games and their home games alone, a bottom 30 team in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And when Western Illinois was able to do a solid job a few years ago, it was because they became a really good rebounding team, and right now they're about 277th in the country in terms of their overall rebound percentage. Not like Edwardsville has necessarily been amazing, but they're more around about 225th, and I do think that for this Edwardsville team, they should be a bit of a favorite here. I set them at 5. They are having some major difficulties with regards to their outside shooting outside the top 225 in terms of their own three-point shooting percentage. Now, to the credit of Edwardsville, they become a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and you've got Ring Malaith, who's been able to do a nice job supplying about 17 points per game. He shoots about 33% from three-point shot. When he's been out there, Miles Thompson has been solid, but he's right now dealing with a little bit of an injury, and that's a big reason why I did have to knock this Edwardsville team, because he's the only player other than Malaith that's averaging over 8 points per game. Jack Champion, who comes over from Indiana State, 4.5 assists, steal and a half, 7.5 points per game. He's been able to do a pretty rock solid job there. And you know that both of these teams are going to be playing at a relatively slow and controlled tempo. For Edwardsville, they're about 251st in the country in terms of total possessions, bringing Western Illinois down to about 274th. And even though Western Illinois is a team as well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, I do think that gets a little bit better with bringing in Isaiah Griffin from Idaho State. He's been doing a nice job with about 10.5 points, 4 boards, and he's shooting 44% from 3. For Western Illinois, they only shoot 31% from the outside and have been outside the top 225 in terms of ball security. But for this Western Illinois team, I do think that they're going to be able to do an okay job down low here. They have been a top 175 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. You've got Lucas Lorenzen, who's been supplying 14 points, 4.5 rebounds, and you've got a whole is greater than some of its parts approach down low with Francis Ukazwa, along with Kirik Dixon, being able to combine for about 17 points, 11.5 rebounds per game, and Okazwa is able to give you a little bit over a steal per game. I think that both of these offenses are just not going to be able to get a lot going, and that does just enough for Western Illinois to hold in there. I set my line at 5. I'm seeing SIU Edwardsville as a 5.5 point favorite, so 5.5, my minimum buy point here on Western Illinois, but won't take those points and the under. 8-11, 8-12 on the card. It is Portland. They are on the road against UC Santa Barbara. The Gauchos are a 9-point favorite. Your total on this game is 152, and Santa Barbara, I made them an 8.5 point favorite, so 9+ is my buy point here on Portland. Portland has been able to do a really good job down low. They're a top 40 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. The biggest issue that you've got with Portland has been the ball security. Over 15 turnovers per game. They're a bottom 30 team in terms of taking care of the ball. Though you do have the 2 freshmen in Timo George along with Joel Foxwell combined for 26.5 points per game. Foxwell's giving you 7 assists per game. The 3.7 turnovers needs to clean that up, but he has been able to also give you about 35% 3-point shooting. But Kai Balu has been able to step up with about 41% 3-point shooting, 12 points per game. And as a matter of fact, you've got now 5 different guys for this Portland team that have been able to give you over 10.5 points per game. They don't necessarily have a lot of guys coming in off the bench that can really pop it from 3, but you do have Jermaine Balsinger-Webb, who's a true 7-footer, who's able to give you a little bit of something down low. And this has been a Santa Barbara team that traditionally has been a slow team that has been able to play relatively rock solid on defense, and they are back to playing relatively slow and controlled. About 285th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Portland is 30th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so we're going to have a little bit of a tempo war there. But for Santa Barbara, just not quite the same team defensively. They've been outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, even though they're still a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage, because they're just giving it up from 3. Teams are shooting nearly 39% from 3 against them, bottom 15 mark in all of college basketball. I do think that improves, and you've got 2 sharpshooters in Colin Smith. He's 6'8", give you about 12.5 points, 4 boards. He's shooting over 43% from 3, and then Aiden Mahaney, who just couldn't get out there over at UConn last year, but we remember how good he was over at St. Mary's. He's showing that scoring prowess, 15 points. He's been able to shoot over 42.5% from 3. They've dealt with a little bit of injury. Mario Little has been missing for 3 games due to ailment. You have to think that he's going to be out of the fold once again until further notice, but we've got Zion Sensi down low, has been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game. I do like his overall game. And then on the Portland side of things, I do think that the sloppiness is going to be a bit costly, but the way that they're able to pile drive the ball inside, the way that they've been able to do a relatively okay job as well in terms of generating turnovers themselves. Top 175 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. I do think that they do just enough to hold in there. Portland is going to get their points inside. I think that Santa Barbara is going to get their points from the outside. So I set my total here at a 154.5. I do like the over, and with Portland, I set them as an 8.5 point dog. So at 9+, I'm going to be willing to take those points. 8-13, 8-14 on the card. Siena is on the road against Indiana. Indiana, a 22.5 to a 23.5 point favor. 140.5 to a 141.5 is the total, and I set a total of 135.5. I do like the under. You got a Siena bunch that's playing at one of the slowest paces in all of college basketball. Siena right now clocking in 351st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Indiana, a very mid-tempo team. Indiana is right around about like 157th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for the Indiana defense, it's been quite good. Top 30 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And just from watching this team from afar, it just feels like they are slowing down a little bit more recently. We have seen the defense really be able to hold up as they've given up 72 points or fewer in pretty much all but 2 of their games ever since the Marquette game. And for Indiana, they've been having Tucker DeVries be a little bit hot and cold recently, but still does a nice job south of the stat sheet, even on nights that he doesn't score. 16 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists per game, and then Lamar Wilkerson has really been the main scorer for the team. He's shooting 43% for 3, 18.5 points, 2.5 assists per game, and Tatum Connerway has actually been your main facilitator with about 4.5 assists per game to help out Cooper Enright, who's been able to do a nice job at the controls as well. Indiana does a nice job taking care of the ball, top on our team in terms of ball security, and they've been very good on the interior as well. Top 30 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, a top 40 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage. That's big against the Siena team that has not been able to get it going from 3-point range. They're shooting 29% from the outside, but for Siena, they're actually 37th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, top 20 in terms of points allowed per possession away from home, top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, doing a great job on the glass as well. You've got Tasman Goodrick, who's been able to supply 7.5 boards, 9.5 points per game. Gavin Doty, 6.5 rebounds, 15 points per game. At 33% for 3, he's the only guy that is averaging over 7 points per game out of their top 5 scorers that's shooting above 31% from 3, but they've done a nice job in terms of mixing and matching with really a rotation of 7 guys. They really haven't been able to go much beyond that because of injuries, but you've got Brandon Quayle, who's been able to do a nice job with about 10.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, good versatility with this team, some nice active hands with Justice Schultz, one of your main guards, give you 5.3 assists, 1.8 steals per contest, supplying about 12.5 points per game. I do think that Siena is going to do a good job with their defense. I just don't think that they're going to be able to get any offense going whatsoever, and as a result, I do think that Indiana is going to be able to bully them a little bit down low. I set my line at 23.5. I'm willing to lay up to 23 with Indiana. I did set a total here of a 135.5, so I'm in on the under. 815, 816 on the card. It is Temple. We give our O to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls, and they're going to be playing with Princeton. Princeton is a 9.5 to a 10.5 point underdog. 142.5 to 143.5 is the total, and set a total of 142.5. So 143 plus. I'm in on the under. Princeton, as we know, they're not typically a super duper up-tempo team. They sped up a little bit this year, but they're still about 304th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and this is a Temple squad that is 319th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. These two teams are very much based around execution, and right now, Princeton's not executing on offense. They are outside the top 225 in terms of ball security. They're outside the top 300 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. Their 3-point shooting has really taken a dive. You do have Jackson Hickey, who's done a nice job shooting about 42% for 3 of 14 points per game, but their main returner from season ago, Dalen Davis, has been missing for each of the last 7 days, and that has really been causing for a lot of strife, and I should say 7 games, not just 7 days, but 7 games. And for Malik Abdullah, he's been out of the fold for the last game or two as well. He's their main big man, and in the last 2 games that he had actually played, he was very limited, so even if he does try to give it a go in this game, you have to figure that he's going to be less than 100%, so CJ Happy needs to step up down low, 9.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and if Abdullah does not go, you don't have a single guy on the roster right now that's giving you over 5 rebounds per game. It's just chaos for a Princeton team that's not really going to force the issue. They're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. You've got a Temple team that does a great job in terms of taking care of the ball. Top 5 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Bottom 30 team in terms of generating turnovers, and they have been outside the top 250 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. You're getting gashed offensively, and Temple's not going to give themselves a lot of second and third chances, but they sink their own shots. They're shooting 37.5% from 3-point range. That is a top 50 mark in all of college basketball. Aiden Tobiason, Darion Bill, Ford Tough. These two guys have been able to give you a combined about 34 points per game, and both have combined to shoot about 38% from 3-point range. Jordan Mason has been pretty efficient at the point guard spot, 4.8 assists to only about 1.3 turnovers per game, about 11 points per game, and typically this team is just absolutely outgunned down low because they don't have a single guy that's giving you 5+ rebounds per game. But against this Princeton team, they should be able to hold up in terms of the post. Jamal Felt has only been able to give you about 3.5 rebounds per game, but I do think that there's a little bit of upside with him. They've dealt with a little bit of injury with AJ Smith, who comes over from the Citadel in Charleston, deal with ailment, and I have to figure that he's going to be out once again as well. But I do think that for Temple and Princeton, the second chances are just not going to be had in this game, and I do think that Temple is a little bit of a better defensive team, mainly because Princeton is so banged up, and with Princeton, they just don't do a great job of taking care of the ball themselves, unlike Temple. So semi-total 142.5. Think they get a slog of a game at 143 or higher, like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 12 here with Temple. Go Owls. 817, 818 on the card. It is Ryder. They are on the road against VCU. VCU is a 29.5 to a 31-point favorite, and your total is 141.5, and with VCU, Southampton's a 31-point favorite, so at 30.5 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it. This Ryder team is just rough, to say the least. They are outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, a bottom 10 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They have no tempo whatsoever, 331st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. While it's a VCU team that they're playing fast, not necessarily too fast for their own good, about 91st in terms of total possessions per game. They're 89th in terms of rebound percentage. They're good in a lot of aspects. They're not necessarily amazing in any of them. And for Wright, the one thing that they've been okay at is rebounding. They're a top 200 team in terms of their rebound percentage, so they're not getting absolutely bludgeoned down low, but in the backcourt play has not been great. Zion Cruz, Flash Burton, they both give you 10.8 points per game. Between the two of them, they are shooting less than 24% from three-point range, and the only other guy that gives you more than 4.6 points per game is Caleb Smith. To his credit, 7 rebounds, 7.8 points per game, and for this Rider team, they've been a top 225 team in terms of rebound percentage on the offensive side of things, but they're in the bottom 5 in both 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and this is a team that has turned the ball over 14 times per game. They're a bottom 10 team in terms of generating turnovers, so teams are getting very clean possessions as well, so that bodes well for a VCU team that at this point as a whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach. You don't have anyone that gives you over 13.2 points per game, but as of right now, you've got 6 different guys between 8.3 and 13.2 points per game, with Terrence Hill being that main scorer, shooting 47% from 3, 13 points per contest. Laser Djokovic, 12 points, 5 rebounds per game. Barry Evans, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists, 9 points per contest. So had a lot of guys doing a nice job stuff in the stat sheet. VCU outside the top 150 in terms of ball security, and they've been about country average with their 2-point shooting percentage. They are shooting about 37% from 3. That's the top 75 mark in the country, and they've done a great job holding up down low. They've been a top 35 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, so I do think that VCU should be able to overrun a Rider team that just doesn't have a lot going well for them, with this VCU team also being a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I do think that that leads to a lot of dead possessions in this game, so set VCU as a 31-point favorite. I'm willing to lay up to 30.5 with them, and on the underside, my total at 137. 819, 820 on the card. Eastern Michigan is on the road against Wright State. Wright State hopes to be the right side as they are 6.5-point favorites. Total on this game, it actually opened up at a 144. Right now, I am seeing a 140.5, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Wright State. I did set them as a 9-point favorite. Wright State last year was 330th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they are very much improved on the defensive side of things this season. They have become a team that's more around about 155th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Wright State, this used to be a very up-tempo team, very mid-tempo this year, about 210th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Eastern Michigan right there with 212th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for Wright State, it's been all about the freshman Michael Cooper being able to step up. 16 points, 3 boards, 3 assists. Right now, he's shooting about 42% from 3 for a team that's been country average, 34.5% with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, and they're doing a nice job as a collective of being able to hit the glass. Andre Holden has been one of your main guys, 7.5 points, 5.5 boards, 1.7 blocks per game, and then Michael Baje has been able to give you 11 points, 6 rebounds, so he's been able to do a nice job contributing on the glass. It's a unit that has been a top 150 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. You've got an Eastern Michigan team that are a little bit fragile down low and just not necessarily executing great on offense. They're outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, as they've been really relying upon Mohammed Habhab, who's been able to give you 14.5 points, 8 boards. He doesn't necessarily shoot it well from 3, but outside of him, you just don't have necessarily a lot of creators for this team, and it has been a Eastern Michigan team that's had a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. For this team, they're about 300th in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage as well. They're doing a much better job of being able to guard the arc. This team the last few seasons was terrible at guarding the 3-point line. Now they're about country average with this regard, so it is very much improved from a season ago. You've had Carlos Hart along with Addison Patterson step up with a combined about 24 points, and they both give you 5 rebounds per game between the two of them, 5.5 assists and 3.5 turnovers per game. John Sanders, who comes over from Northwestern State, he's really taken a dive with his 3-point shooting, only about 8 points per game, and in this circumstance, Wright State is going to be able to generate some turnovers on Eastern Michigan, make this a sloppier game, so I did set a total of a 135. I'm going to be in on the under end with this Wright State team. I made them a 9-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay that number. 821, 822 on the card. Coastal Carolina is on the road against St. Joe's. St. Joe's hopes to not be average Joe's as 7.5 to 8.5 point favorites. Total is 142, and I did set St. Joe's as a 6-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Coastal Carolina. One thing Coastal Carolina is not going to be doing in this game is generating turnovers. Outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but if you look at the overall shooting percentages that this Coastal Carolina team has been able to come up with, they've been able to do a great job of holding up on that front. While this is a team that they do allow a few too many second and third chances, they have been outside the top 235 in terms of their overall rebound percentage, but still, even though Coastal Carolina is not necessarily going to be forcing the issue in terms of turnovers. They get to go up against the St. Joe's team that's well outside the top 300 with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage. And for St. Joe's, this has been a unit that they themselves have been able to do a nice job in terms of guarding the arc as well. Teams are shooting just 27.2% from three-point range against them in their home games, but we are also seeing both of these teams cranking up the tempo a little bit more. St. Joe's about 184th in terms of total possessions per game. Coastal Carolina was super slow last year. They're up to about 142nd, and with me thinking that there's going to be some late game fouling, I'm in on the over. I did set my total at 144, and I do think that St. Joe's is right now shooting 27.5% from three. Does see positivity there. Jaden Glover, 13.5 points. He shoots 36% from three-point range, and he is the only of their top 5 scorers that shoots above 20% from three. Derek Simpson, 11 points, 5.5 boards, and as a collective, out of your top 6 scorers for the St. Joe's team, they all give you at least 3.5 rebounds per game, all but one of them at least 4.3 boards per game, and this has been one of the best shot blocking teams in all of college basketball. You've had Justice Ajabor do a pretty solid job down low, only about 4.2 points and 4 boards per game, but 2.2 blocks per game, so they've been able to do a relatively solid job with that regard. But I do think that Coastal Carolina is going to be able to hold in there because they do, for one, take care of the ball very well themselves. A top 30 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they've also got a pair of guards in Rashi Jones along Joshua Beadle, who are both giving you 14.5 points per game apiece. Beadle was a guy that saw good minutes over at Boston College, 3.2 assists per game. Rasheed Jones is more of your off-ball scorer, shooting 36% from three with his 14.5 points per game. AJ Dantzler is able to shoot 37% from three. Reggie Hill shooting 41% from three. Dantzler about 13.5 points per game. Hill only about 6.5 points, but also throws in their 6 rebounds per game as well. And for Coastal Carolina, I do think that with them allowing for as many clean possessions as they do while they themselves keep it clean, I think that you get enough scoring opportunities for the over, and I do think that that keeps Coastal Carolina lively in this game. So I did set a total here of a 144. I do like the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with the Chanticleers. 823, 824 on the card. It is Canisius. They are on the road against Duquesne, and Duquesne finds themselves as a 17.5 to a 20-point favorite. So on this game, it is between 138.5 to a 141.5. These are moving quite a bit from the openers. We're getting some very strange movement right now, but that said, I did set a total of a 143.5. I am in on the over. Now, Canisius has been a bottom 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and last year, Duquesne was one of the most slow and controlled teams in all of college basketball. Not the case this year. Duquesne is up to 40th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Now, I will say this. It does feel like Duquesne is getting back to their roots. They've been playing at a pace of about 7.5 possessions per game fewer in their last 3 games than they did in the first 8 games of the season. A little bit of that is a byproduct of playing against lower competition, but for Duquesne, it's very clear that this team is looking to play quite a bit more up-tempo, and the big issue for this team has been turnovers outside the top 300. In terms of ball security, you do have Terrence Gunyard in the backcourt giving you about 5 assists per game. He's been the main scorer for this team with 15.5 points per game and does shoot 42% from 3. Duquesne neither here nor there with their 3-point shooting. They're shooting about 33.7% from the outside, and they do have John Hughley, who's been incredibly versatile, began his career over at Pittsburgh, and he's playing 15.5 points, 5.5 boards. He's been able to shoot only about 30% from 3-point range, but Jacob Niesis has been able to shoot 40% from 3, 6 boards. He's able to give you some nice contributions there, and for this Duquesne team, it's just really been a fallback with their defense. They're outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Canisius is one of those classic teams so where even though they play slowly, that doesn't mean that they necessarily play great defense. It is a Canisius bunch as well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Did give up only 43 points when they played against Maine a few weeks ago, but still, other than that performance, it's been relatively rough. But I mean, this team is more balanced than they were a season ago. Last year, Paul McMillan was averaging 20 points per game, and he just really didn't get anything else. Now you've got 4 guys between 8.4 and 13 points per game, with Marcus Nyblack just coming back for the team. He returned in that main game, and he was able to give the team 13 points, 10 rebounds in that one, so that gives them a nice shot in the arm after he missed the first 11 or so games of the season. Khalil Singleton, along with Brian Nadanja, they've been able to combine for about 22 points per game, and Singleton is shooting about 36% from 3-point range. Michael Everbrow has been able to elevate the team down low, 2.5 assists, 6.5 rebounds, 8.5 points per contest, so I do like what he's been able to bring to the table. And additionally, this is a Canisius team that has been able to do a relatively okay job on the glass. Top 225 team with regards to their rebound percentage, and they guard the 3-point line well. They've actually been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They're just absolutely allowing way too many easy buckets down low, and with Canisius, they're outside the top 300 in terms of ball security. Did set my total 143.5. I do think that you get a little bit more of an up and down game, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the over, and with Duquesne set them as a 17.5 point favorite. I do think that their turnovers might be a little bit costlier, so at 18 plus, we'll take those points with Canisius. 825, 826 on the card. Northeastern is on the road against Rhode Island. Rhode Island's a favorite of 10.5 points. 143.5 to 144.5 is the total. Made my total a 142.5. I do like the under. Northeastern is playing a little bit faster than they have in past years, and Rhode Island is playing quite a bit more slowly. Rhode Island is down to about 303rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Northeastern is actually now 152nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I did set Rhode Island as a 12.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay it. I do feel like this is a Rhode Island bunch that is really being able to find their bearings on defense, and they've got a really nice do-it-all player in Tyler Cochran. He was a much better three-point shooter when he was over at Toledo 2 years ago than the current 28%, so I think that there's going to be positivity there, but 13.5 points, 5.5 boards, 2 assists, 3.3 steals per game. Now, Rhode Island needs to do a better job of taking care of the ball themselves. They've been outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, but top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per-possession basis. For Rhode Island, they're back in the top 150 in terms of rebound percentage, and top 100 team in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage, with Jonah Hinton doing a nice job in terms of both the offensive and defensive side of things. 16 points, pair of assists, shoots 36% from three, and Jameer Tripp has seen stripping off the bench. He's given them 40% three-point shooting, 12.5 points per game. On the flip side for Northeastern, it's been just a little bit of a hodgepodge in terms of backcourt, as they're just not taking good care of the ball. Outside the top 260 in terms of ball security, they're outside the top 250 in terms of their own three-point shooting percentage. Now, much of this has been due to the injury to L.A. Pratt. He has not been out there on the floor in over a month, and I don't think that he's going to be back for this game. He was averaging 17 points per game, and now they've been trying to mix a match without him. Xavier Abreu has been an 8-6 man with about 10.5 points per game. William Kamuri has been able to supply about 7.5 points per game. He shoots 36% from three-point range, but as of right now, you've got Mike Langnane, hopefully I said that correct, giving you about 3 assists per game, and they've been looking to a little bit of a pass-first guy, Lucas Sora, who's been supplying about 8 points, 3 assists per game, so those guys have been mixing and matching, but it's clear that they can't find their bearings with that regard, and that's a big reason why I've had to downgrade this team this much. They did have a little bit of spirited effort against Syracuse a few days ago, and this team has still been relatively solid on the glass as well. This is a Northeastern team that has been a top 225 team in terms of rebound percentage, and they themselves have been a top 150 team in terms of generating turnovers. They're looking to push everything inside. They're a top 40 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from two-point range, but that's really been a forte of Rhode Island, so I think that actually helps out the Rams in this circumstance. And with Yuri Fritz really being your main guy with 13 points, 6 rebounds per game, I do think that Rhode Island finds a way to generate some turnovers, get the job done here. Set my line at 12.5. I'm going to be one to lay with Rhode Island. I'm in on the under as well. I set my total at a 142.5. 827, 828 on the card. It is Missouri, and they're playing against Illinois. This is a neutral court game, as you've got Illinois from the Enterprise Center being a 8.5 to a 9.5 point favorite. Totals between 155.5 to a 156.5, and in the border ward, I did set Illinois as a 7.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be one to take the points. This is a game that's technically out there in St. Louis, right there on the border of Illinois and Missouri, so relatively equal footing here. And for Illinois, they're going to be able to do a nice job down low. This continues to be a top 20 team in terms of rebound percentage, even though they dealt with a few injuries. They now have Tomislav Ivisic back. Hasn't been himself this year. 10 points, 5 rebounds per game. I think that he's going to get better as the season goes along, and I know that they're dealing with a little bit of strife, and they're bringing in like someone new, because Mahalo Petrovic, he was with the team and now he's not with the team, so you've got a little bit of this and that going on. But in the backcourt, Kylan Boswell, Andrei Stojakovic, they've been able to combine for just under 32 points per game. Once again, not an amazing three-point shooting team. It's better than it was a season ago, but these two guys have been combining to shoot less than 30% from three-point range. It's actually been Keaton Wagler who's been stepping up, shooting about 39% from 3, 15 points, 3.5 assists per game, and Illinois does a great job in terms of not turning the ball over. Top 25 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they refuse to put you on the free throw line. They're a top 10 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis, which is quite impressive considering how physical they are on the glass. But this is a Missouri team that has been a top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and it's a Missouri team that they are very efficient on the offensive end, but it's not like they're necessarily playing at warp speed. About 166 in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Illinois has slowed themselves down as well. They're down to about 215th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but with Missouri, I do think that the overall versatility keeps them lively, as they're much better on the glass than they have been in past years. Sean Phillips along with Mark Mitchell combined for 12 rebounds per game. Mitchell is your top scorer with 18 points per game. Not a guy that shoots it from 3, but Jacob Cruz at 6'8". He's been able to shoot 43% from the outside, 15 points, 5 boards. I love his game. Jaden Stone has stepped up with about 13.5 points per game. Now, he's been missing for much of the season, and he's sort of been in and out of the lineup. I think that he's going to be out once again in this game, but even with him out, Sebastian Mack, Anthony Robinson, these two guys are combining for about 19 points per game, and for Missouri. They have been turning the ball over a little bit more than what you'd like outside the top 225 in terms of ball security, but now you go up against an Illinois team that, while they do a great job taking care of the ball, bottom 5 team in the country in terms of generating turnovers. So you should get nice, clean possessions on both sides. That should lead to quite a bit of scoring in this spot, and as a result, I did set my total at a 161.5. I'm going to be in on the over, and I do like the points here with Missouri. 829, 830 on the card. Wisconsin plays those to Central Michigan. Central Michigan is a underdog of 29.5 to 30.5 points. Tonight's game opened up at a 152.5. All of a sudden, we're up to a 156.5 to a 157.5, and I still do like the over. I set my total at a 159.5, and for Central Michigan, this team has been getting blowtorched on defense. They're outside the top 320 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Central Michigan, they're between 290th and 300th in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage defense. Now, Central Michigan has also been able to do an okay job in terms of pile driving the ball down low. Top 150 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. I have to think that their 28.5% 3-point shooting is going to see some positivity, especially against a Wisconsin team that is outside the top 255 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. So I did set a line of 27.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points as Nathan Clearbot, who's been doing a solid job down low for Central Michigan, block and a half, 13 points, 7 rebounds per game against a Wisconsin team that, as we know, they're doing the little things well for Wisconsin overall. They're 74th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but it's also a Wisconsin unit that is scoring over 26 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. If you look just at the home numbers, they're 27th in terms of points per possession, with John Blackwell and Nick Boyd combining for a little bit over 39 points per game. Blackwell shoots 41% from 3 for a Wisconsin team that's very average with their 3-point shooting at 33.8%. Nolan Winter should be able to control things down low. We saw him get emotional after that loss against Villanova. 13.5 points, 9.5 boards, a little bit over a block per game, and he's able to pop it a little bit from 3. Not necessarily a great 3-point shooter, and then a lot of the ancillary pieces are shooting like 35% from 3. Braden Carrington, Andrew Rhode have been that. Alexis Belasikas is someone that they've been looking to a little bit more. 4.5 points, 4.5 boards. He has seen a lot of minutes recently with at least 6 rebounds in 3 of the last 5 games, and well, I do think that Wisconsin going to be able to just really take advantage of a bad Central Michigan defense. I do think that Central Michigan sees some positivity with their 3-point shooting. You've got Ronnie Johnson, who's been dealing with a little bit of injury. He's been able to supply 9 points per game along Fat Brooks, the transfer from Michigan, but looks like Johnson should be all good to go in this one, and I think that that'll be just enough for Central Michigan to hold in this game. Set my line at 27.5. At 28 plus, won't take the points with Central Michigan, and on the over, set my total at a 159.5. At 31, 832 on the card, IU Indy is on the road against Grand Canyon, and Grand Canyon finds themselves as very sizable favorites here of 24 points. 166.5 is the total. Set a total of a 168. I'm in on the over for Grand Canyon. This team has been well outside the top 100 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but I do think that that game against Wyoming was really able to get them rocking and rolling, and you've got a Grand Canyon team that is going to be able to dominate down low. IU Indy is one of the worst rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. Nana Wusu-Nane, 10 points, 9 rebounds. He's able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3. He should be able to give this Grand Canyon team a boost, and for IU Indy, they get to go up against a Grand Canyon team that's only shooting 29.7% from 3, but I think that there's a positive regression coming for the team, especially with the way that Caleb Shaw is out shooting 47% from the outside, 10 points per game. Brian Moore Jr. was a much better 3-point shooter when he was over at Norfolk St a season ago. Only 8 points at about 30% 3-point shooting. That should be able to go northward as well, and Grand Canyon has been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they're just decimating on the glass. A top 50 team with regards to rebound percentage. They're a team that does a good job in terms of guarding the 3-point line as well. A top 110 team with that regard, and for IU Indy, this team is very much gambling for turnovers, and they've been able to do a nice job in terms of winning the turnover battle, but I mean, this team shoots about 32% from 3-point range, or outside the top 350 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're one of the worst rebound rate teams I have seen in quite a while, and Kyler D'Agostino and Matt Compass have been nice scorers. D'Agostino, 15.5 points, shoots 39.5% from 3. Compass, 11.5 points per game, but they just don't have the size to match up with Grand Canyon. Finley Woodward with about 8 points, 5.2 rebounds per game. He is a lone guy on the roster that gives you over 4.3 rebounds per game, despite the fact that this team is in the top 5 nationally in terms of total possessions per game. Like, with that many possessions, you should be pulling in some rebounds. They're just not doing so, and I think that Grand Canyon wins from within. You've got that ruckus environment out there at Grand Canyon. Might be a little bit more muted because the kids are on break, but still, set Grand Canyon as a 26-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. I do think that Grand Canyon is going to be able to turn into the turnovers some fast break buckets to be able to get you the over, so like the over, and I'm willing to lay it with Grand Canyon. 833, 834 on the card. It is Kansas, and they play us at Davidson. Davidson, a 16.5 to an 18.5 point underdog, and it's on this game between 136.5 to a 137.5. I did set Kansas as an 18-point favorite. Right now, I'm seeing a lot of 16.5 to 17.5. My max lay with them, but I'm going to be willing to lay. These are two teams that are not playing very up-tempo whatsoever, especially Davidson. Davidson is right now 357th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Kansas has been about 281st, and Darren Peterson, he just continues to be in and out of the lineup. I would think that he's probably going to be out of the fold in this game, but even with him out, this has been a Kansas team that has been a top 25 unit in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and now they're getting a lot more out of both Trey White along with Melvin Council. These two guys are combining for 27.5 points per game. They're both shooting a combined about 36.5 to 37% from three-point range between the two of them. Council has been able to give you about 4.8 assists and 1.4 turnovers per game. And Kansas, even though they're not the same shooting team that they have been in the past, they're still a top 75 team in terms of taking care of the ball. Only 10.5 turnovers per game. Kansas not going to give themselves a lot of second and third chances on the glass, but they're one of the best shot blocking teams in all of college basketball because Flory Badunga down low, 14.5 points, 9.3 boards, 2.4 blocks per contest. This Kansas team has also been great in terms of guarding the arc. As a matter of fact, they are numero uno in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. That's an issue with the Davidson team that they are very, very weak down low. Davidson does not have a single guy in the roster that's giving you over 5 rebounds per game. Yampla 2 with 5.6 points, 4.8 rebounds per game. He's one of just 2 guys on the roster with over 3.3 rebounds per game. Your other is Josh Scobins, who comes over from Army for Josh Scobins, 10.5 points, 4.2 rebounds per game, and this is a Davidson team that they very much live and die by the three. They shoot 38% from three-point, shot 50 mark in all of college basketball, but they're outside the top 300 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They do a nice job taking care of the ball. Davidson, a top 100 team, serves a few turnovers on a per-possession basis, but also outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, or not necessarily generating a ton of turnovers. Not the worst team with that regard, but you're going to need these ancillary guys like Hunter Adams, Sam Brown, Robert Blums. They all give you between 8.7 and 9.7 points per game to be able to give you a little bit more. And against this Kansas team, I think that they're just going to be swallowed up on the inside. And you've had the Wake Forest transfer and Parker Frederickson only be able to give you about 8 points per game. Expected a little bit more out of him. Do think that this is going to be a control game. Set by total 136, so 136.5 or higher in on the under, and one lay up to 17.5 here with Kansas. 835, 836 on the card. It is Creighton. Then they play OC Utah Tech. Utah Tech, a pretty sizable underdog here. You're going to be catching with them 19.5 to 20.5 points. 144.5 to 145.5 is the total. Creighton has looked quite a bit better over the last few games, but I'm just still not willing to lay this number with them. I set my line at 17.5. I'm taking the points with Utah Tech. It's a Utah Tech team that has been much better on the glass than they have been in past years. Now, the three-point shooting is much worse than it has been in past years. Utah Tech outside the top 3 with their three-point shooting percentage at 30.1%, as each of your top 3 scorers are all shooting below 28% from 3. Ethan Potter, though, who comes over from Utah Valley, 17 points, 7 rebounds, block per contest. He really elevates the team down low. And then Noah Belonga, along Chance Trojulo, have been able to combine for about 23 points per game between the two of them, 10 boards, and about 4 assists per game. Utah Tech has been able to do a solid job in terms of generating turnovers, top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And it's traditionally a Utah Tech team that plays fast, but not overly fast. They're more mid-tempo this year, about 172nd in terms of total possessions per game, and Creighton has really sold themselves out 247th in terms of total possessions per game. And the big question mark for Creighton has been who's going to be that guy that steps up and gives his team scoring. Right now, Josh Hicks is the lone guy that's giving you double figures, 11.8 points per game. Does shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range, and he and Nick Graves have been able to combine for about 6.5 assists per game. Graves has been pretty solid in terms of coming in off the bench and scoring. He did that in their previous win, and he's been able to shoot only about 32% from 3, but gives you a little bit over a steal per contest, and that's a bit more of what Creighton needs, because on defense they are generating no turnovers whatsoever, outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per-possession basis, and they just have not been as good on the defensive glass as they have been in past years, outside the top 150 in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that turn into an offensive rebound for them. They're still pretty good on the inside, top 100 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and though Utah Tech is not a great three-point shooting team, you do have the former top 150 recruit in Sean Holt, who comes over from Georgia and Alabama, gave you about 9 points, 4 boards. He's also been able to supply 3 assists and shoots in the high 30s from three-point range. I think that that's just enough for Utah Tech to remain lively, and it does feel like Creighton is starting to find their bearings on offense. I said my total 145.5, so you're at the 144.5 to 145. I like the over and the points with Utah Tech. 837, 838 on the card. It is Oral Roberts. They play OC UT Arlington. UT Arlington, a 2-point road favorite. 139.5 is the total, and I said a total here of a 148. I do like the over. You've got an Arlington team that has slowed themselves down quite a bit, and they are not taking care of the ball at all. They are a bottom 10 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Oral Roberts more around about 315th with this regard, but you do have an Oral Roberts team that's looking to play at a relatively brisk pace, about 163rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and though this Arlington team has been 72nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're giving up over 19 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And an Oral Roberts team that has been a top 150 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage, I think exploits this. I said Oral Roberts as the favorite. I like them on the money line for Oral Roberts. Ty Harper has been the main guy, comes over from Youngstown State, 17 points, pair of assists, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, and you just have a lot of size around the perimeter. Each of your top 5 scores for this Oral Roberts team, other than Harper, shoot at least 35% from 3, and Harper still shoots about 33.3% from the outside. You have 2 Yamanachi Williams has been able to slide about 7 points, 5 rebounds per game. It is a Oral Roberts team that they've got to clean up the turnovers, but they themselves have been a top 225 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And for Arlington, this has been a little bit of a mismatch in terms of backcourt. You bring in the Northern Colorado transfer and Marcel McCreary. He's been solid, 12 points per game, shoots about 32% from 3, but Arlington shoots 28% from 3-point. They're allowing opponents to shoot only about 26% from the outside. That's going to see some regression, and their own 3-point shooting, I think, sees positivity. So I'm banking on really both of those things in this spot. And for Arlington, they've been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. To the credit of Arlington, top 50 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound. Rayshon Spencer, like their lone guy that returns from a season ago, a little bit over a steal, a block, 15 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. He's been able to do a solid job there. Kashmir Chavis has been able to throw in there about 9.5 points, 4.5 assists per game, but I do think that the overall sloppiness is going to be costly, and I do think that this UT Arlington 3-point shooting defense does see some inevitable regression. Set a total of 148. I like the over, and Oral Roberts on the money line made Oral Roberts a 2-point favorite. 839, 840 on the card. North Carolina is playing us to East Carolina. East Carolina, a very sizable underdog here. You're going to be catching with them 27 to 27.5 points. 142.5 to 144.5 is the total. I set North Carolina at a 27.5. Right now I'm seeing some 27s. That's the maximum I'm willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. This North Carolina team is just so improved on defense, and they have really slowed themselves down. North Carolina is now 229th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You had an East Carolina team that they are about 204th in the country. So both of these teams relatively mid-tempo, but the problem for East Carolina is the overall perimeter play. 226th in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and they allow opponents at a roadside shooting court venue to shoot 40% from 3. That's a bottom 30 mark in all of college basketball, and leave themselves outside the top 3 in terms of their own 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, North Carolina has been a top 35 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, one of the most dominant rebounding teams in the country, with Caleb Wilson and Henry Vassar combining for exactly 20 rebounds per game. Wilson, 19.5 points, a block per game. Doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3, while Vassar, he shoots 44.8% from the outside. He's supplying about 17 points per game. The team now has Seth Trimble back. He was missing for 9 games. He's been supplying 15.5 points per game when he's been out there. Not the most amazing 3-point shooter, but you don't need him to be. He's a nice driver to help out Kyan Evans, who's been able to give out 4.2 assists to 1.6 turnovers per game. One thing with North Carolina is that they're not going to generate a lot of turnovers. This team is well outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but top 30 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. That does help out East Carolina, who's been very bad at taking care of the ball, outside the top 275 in terms of their ball security, and they are right now shooting 26% from 3, though Jordan Riley has been rock solid. 21.5 points, 5.5 boards, 2 assists, 2 steals. He does it all. His 31% 3-point shooting is right now second best on the team, as Vito Petrovic, he's been able to give the team 3.8 points per game. He shoots 33.3% from 3, as I believe he has attempted 15 threes this season. So that's not a place where you want to be. You've got Giovanni Amaruju down low with about 9 rebounds per game, so he's been able to do a solid job there, but even with the 2-point shooting defense of East Carolina, it's not great. They're outside the top 300. East Carolina is with their 2-point shooting percentage, but they're getting absolutely bludgeoned on the inside. Not a bad rebounding team, but I think that North Carolina is going to be able to dominate on the inside, grab second and third chances, and get the job done. And even though it's not going to be an up-tempo game, I think it's going to be an efficient game. Semi-total 147.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 27. North Carolina 841, 842 on the card. It is BYU. They play with Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington is a pretty good-sized underdog here of 35.5 points. 161.5 to 162.5 is the total. I set my line at a 31, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Eastern Washington, and this Eastern Washington defense is bad. They are outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They don't guard the 2 well. They don't guard the 3 well. They're really not guarding anything well. They're okay at generating turnovers, but they themselves outside the top 250 in terms of their own ball security, but this has been a unit that has been solid with their offense. They're a top 225 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they're feeling like Moses with Isaiah Moses. Give you 37.5% three-point shooting, 17.5 points, 3.7 assists per game. You've got Alton Hamilton IV, who's been able to give you about 6 boards, 2 assists, 12 points per game while shooting 47% from threes. Stanton Rogers has been able to shoot about 40% from the outside. I do like what these guys are able to do, but they're just not going to be able to hold up down low against this BYU team, even though BYU is not like necessarily the most dominant rebounding team in the country. Eastern Washington only 2 guys with over 4.5 rebounds per game, so Kebakita, who's been able to give you about 6.5 to 7 rebounds per game, he should absolutely be dominant here for BYU. And then AJ Devanza, he's been the do-it-all guy, 22.5 points, 7 boards, 3.5 assists. He only shoots about 30% from 3, but then you've got Robert Wright and Richie Saunders combined shoot about 42.5 to 43% from 3 between the two of them. Been able to get a little bit over 34 points per game. Wright has been able to give 5.4 assists and 1.8 steals per game, and the BYU defense has been solid. They're a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They've been a top 50 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. For BYU, they do allow too many second and third chances. But again, with Eastern Washington, you're not going to necessarily get a ton of those. And for BYU, they've been very efficient in terms of taking care of the ball, a top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. But BYU is also not playing quite as fast as a lot of people expected. They're about 156th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Eastern Washington, they're about 83rd. So they're fast, but they're not warp speed fast. I do think that Eastern Washington executes just enough on offense to be able to hold in there. So set a total of 161. You're at the 161.5, 162.5, like the under and the points with Eastern Washington. 843, 844 on the card. Northern Iowa is on the road against St. Mary's. St. Mary's is a 12.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 130.5. I set my total at 127.5. I like the under. You've got a St. Mary's team that, as strange as it is to say, they're playing a little bit more up tempo than they have in past years. It's not much tempo, but for St. Mary's, they're up to about 252nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Northern Iowa is just flogging games up. 335th in terms of total possessions per game, and it's a Northern Iowa team that has been able to do a really good job with their defense. 12th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and I think that does enough to be able to keep them lively in this game. I set my line at 9.5, so here being able to get double figures, I'm going to be wanting those points with Northern Iowa. It's been a team that has been very much based around Mr. Campbell being able to supply for this team. As Trey Campbell, he's been a little bit of a do-it-all guy. He's being able to supply about 12.5 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists from 3-point range, shoots 37.5% from 3 with his 2.3 steals per game. Leon Bond has been that main scorer coming over from Virginia with about 11.5 points per game. He's been able to shoot 46% from 3-point range. This Northern Iowa team is not good at grabbing second and third chances. They are outside the top 340 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but top 175 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. They are going to take it on the chin down low against the St. Mary's team. As for St. Mary's, you've got McKeever, who's been able to give 10-plus rebounds per game. He's going to be able to dominate there. And Paulias Marsoukas, he's one of the more versatile forwards that you're going to find outside the power ranks in all of college basketball. 18.5 points, 7.5 boards, a little bit over 2 assists per game. Doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3, but Mikey Lewis has been one of the best sharpshooters in all of college basketball. 43% 3-point shooter with 15 points per game. And for St. Mary's, even though they still play at a relatively slow pace, this has been one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball as well. You don't necessarily think of that with St. Mary's, but overall they've been 72nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. If you separate it out in their home games and their home games only, they go up to the top 55 in all of college basketball. They always do a relatively solid job in terms of being able to hit their free throws as well. Right now they're shooting 80% the free throw line. That has been a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. Joshua Dent and Mikey Lewis both shooting over 93.5% at the charity stripe, so that is going to be big if you have a little bit of a lower number in those nip and tuck spots. But with this being a double figure line, it means a little bit less in this game, but I do think that this is going to be very much a slow down game. I think that Northern Iowa is going to get no second chances whatsoever, but I do think that they're going to cut off this St. Mary's team, who has been very good with their 3-point shooting, top 75 team with that regard, outside the top 200 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, and that does enough to be able to keep them lively. I set my total at a 127.5. I like the under and the points here with Northern Iowa. 845, 846 on the card. Seesaw and Cal State Northridge, they are going to be playing us to Sacramento St. Sacramento State, an underdog of 7.5 points. Total on this game, it is between 158.5 to a 161. Set a total of 163.5. I do like the over. Got a Sacramento State team as right now clocking in 284th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And Sacramento State playing fast, but not necessarily like overly fast, 109th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Northridge is a team that is going to be very much looking to crank up the tempo. They are 49th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Northridge still having a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball, but it's gotten better. They're still about 253rd in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but go up against the Sacramento State team that hasn't been necessarily great with their perimeter defense. And I mean, for the CSUN team, they're not a team that's laying you up from three. They're shooting only about 31% from the outside, but they continue to be a top 100 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Joshua O'Garrow has been the main reason why. 13.5 points, 9.5 boards, 3 assists per game. And then Josiah Davis has stepped up as a nice facilitator. About 6 assists per game, 12.5 points, and with O'Gara and Davis, they both have been rough with their three-point shooting, but Larry Hughes has been able to shoot 42.5% from three. And though this is a CSUN team that doesn't necessarily pop it well from three, they're a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from two-point range, so this team is looking to knife it inside. And for Sacramento State, right now they're dealing with an injury to one of their main big men in Jeremiah Cherry. When he's been out there on the floor for the 6 games that he's played, 15.5 points, 8 rebounds per game, but we have not seen him in darn near a month, and that is going to be very much hurting their interior play, as right now they're outside the top 230 in terms of opponents' shoot-point shooting percentage, and this is a team that's really given it up on the defensive glass. They are outside the top 300 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Mikey Williams in the backcourt has done a good job of teaming up with Prophet Johnson. These guys are combining for 30 points per game. Johnson shoots 42% from three and throws in their 4 assists, 2.6 steals per game. Williams, 5.2 assists, but the 3.5 turnovers per game have been a little bit rough on this offense, and you don't necessarily have the world's greatest depth. You've been able to have Jaden Teat off the bench give you about 7.5 points, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range. They're looking at Shakir O'Neal, that is the son of Shaquille O'Neal, to step up, but he's still only giving you about 4 points per game as a starter. He just has not been very effective for this team. It's a CSUN team that they themselves will have a few defensive warts, even though they've been able to do a great job with regards to rebounding. They do give it up on the inside, outside the top 175 in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage, so I do think that you're going to get a bountiful amount of points in this game. So by total 163.5, I do like the over, but with CSUN, I do think that they just dominate on the glass, so I set them as an 11.5 point favorite, won't lay the number, and I'm going to be in on the over. 847, 848 on the card. It is San Diego, and they're going to be on the road against Washington. Washington, very sizable favorites here of 18.5 points. So on this game, it is 155.5 to 156.5. So by total 155.5. So at a 156 plus, I do like the under. You've got a San Diego group that they're not necessarily playing overly fast. Right now, in terms of total possessions per game, they're 219th in all of college basketball. And this is a Washington team that is relatively mid-tempo themselves, with Washington about 81st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're starting to play a little bit faster, but keep in mind, they've got a double overtime game against Southern that is really warping that set. If you look possessions per 40 minutes, a little bit more country average, but Washington should absolutely be able to overrun this team down low, as you've got Hans Steinbach, who's been able to give you 17.5 points, nearly 12 rebounds per game. He has been absolutely dominant for this unit. You've got Wesley Yates in the backcourt, give you 15 points per game. It is a Washington team that's a pedestrian team with their three-point shooting. 33.8% is right around about country average, but it's also a Washington group that has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of guarding things on the inside. Top 100 team in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage. Now for San Diego, they've had a very difficult time taking care of the ball. San Diego is turning the ball over darn near 13 times per game, outside the top 250 in terms of overall ball security. They've been a solid 34% three-point shooting team, with having Tyler Johnson along Tunari Lane be able to step up, come in about 25 points per game, and Lane has been able to shoot 38% from three-point range. They're coming off of a really nice triumph a few nights ago against UC San Diego, but this team is going to get absolutely blowtorch on the glass. For San Diego, they're outside the top 250 in terms of rebound percentage. You don't have a single guy on the roster that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, with Alejandro Olivas right now giving you 4.5 rebounds per game. He has only seen action in 4 games this far this season, as he's been dealing with injuries. So guys that have actually been playing the full allotment of games this year, none of them are giving you over 3.5 rebounds per game. Now you do have Juan Sebastian Godecito shooting 38.5% from three. He's been able to supply 10 points per game, and for the San Diego team, they've been a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but I do think that Zoom Diallo is going to be able to do a nice job taking care of the ball. And with Washington losing that game to Seattle, I am willing to bet that they are going to be very focused in this game to be able to atone for that. Semi line at 19.5. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 19 with Washington, and at a 156 or higher, I'm in on the under. And then with these final two games, I have to do these without numbers since these teams played yesterday for the Sun Bowl Classic, but I've got my handicap. 849, 850 on the card. North Dakota State is on the road. This is a true road game against UTEP since UTEP is the host of this. I set North Dakota State as a 4-point favorite. So 1 to lay up to 3.5 with the Bison, 4.5 or more. Take the points with UTEP and then set a total of a 140. So 139.5 or less in on the over, 140.5 or higher the under. Both of these teams very much do specialize in generating turnovers, but for North Dakota State, after last year, they were 5th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Entered into yesterday more like 153rd. 3-point shooting has really fallen off the map for them outside the top 2 in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. After last year, they were number 1 in all of college basketball, and for North Dakota State, not like they've been the most efficient defense in the world. They're still hovering right around about 259 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but the one thing that they're doing is generating turnovers. If you look on turnovers forced on a per possession basis after North Dakota State last year was absolutely terrible with this regard, they entered into yesterday 51st, and for UTEP, that's the name of the game for them. UTEP 44th in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, entered into yesterday actually number 1 in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers per possession in specifically their home games, but that fell a little bit off the map in that game against Norfolk State, and for UTEP, they just don't have a lot of scoring right now. This team is outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game, while North Dakota State has actually sped it up quite a bit. They're inside the top 110 in terms of total possessions per game, but for this UTEP group, they're really relying upon just some mix and match guys like a Kasim Watson, who's been solid. He's been able to give you about 10 points, 4.5 rebounds per game coming on over from Delaware State. Jamal West has been one of your main guys, 13 points, 6 rebounds, but you really don't have a lot of outside shooting aside from Elijah Jones. Jones has been pretty solid, 14 points, 4.5 rebounds, but year in and year out, this is a UTEP team that they get absolutely decimated on the glass. It's happening to them once again, and then Damari Wheeler-Thomas has been able to be a solid player for North Dakota State. He's been able to supply the team with about 14 or so points per game, and this is a North Dakota State team that I'm not going to go out here and call them like beastly with regards to rebounding or anything like that, but they don't allow a ton of second and third chances. They're a top 125 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Meanwhile, UTEP entered into yesterday 311, so they are going to give up a lot of second and third chances. And for the North Dakota State group, they do return a few pieces from a season ago. It is very much a new look team, but one of the guys that they do have back is the 6'8" versatile piece, Noah Fredersen, who's been able to give you about 8 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Last year shot it pretty well from 3. He's been shooting below 20% this season, but Travion Carson and Anthony Stefanovic going into yesterday, they were combining for about 21.5 points per game, and Stefanovic 4.8 assists, fewer than 2 turnovers per game, both shooting 40% from 3. Markai Strickland, who comes on over from the MAC, has been able to give you about 14.5 points per game, good with his active hands, not so great with his 3-point shooting. So in the end, I do think that you get a relatively middle of the road game, especially with this being a back-to-back, 139.5 or less in on the over, 140.5 or higher the under. And with North Dakota State, 1 to lay up to 3.5 with them, 4.5 for more, take the points with UTEP. And then this is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 851, 852, you've got UC Irvine, Zatzov for the Anteaters. They are going to be playing against Norfolk St. No numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap. I did say UC Irvine as a 9.5 point favorite, so 9 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay with them. 10 or more, I'm going to be taking the points with Norfolk State, and then set a total of a 135.5. So 135 or less in on the over, 136 or higher the under. It's an Irvine team that does play at a pretty good tempo. 140th going into yesterday in terms of total possessions per game, and probably went up a little bit after yesterday's results, but second in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home, just 321st in terms of points per possession. Again, probably going to be a little bit higher after what we saw yesterday with them breaking 70 points. And if you have a Norfolk State team that is relatively mid-tempo, about 211th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, I do think that the back-to-back element might get to them a little bit, and I do expect a little bit more from Norfolk State's Wright. Ford comes over from Texas A&M Corpus Christi. It's been a big disappointment with only 4 points per game, but where I think the Norfolk State is going to be outgunned is down low. You really don't have a single guy on the roster that's able to give you over 5 rebounds per game. Devon Ellis, right around about 10.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. He's been able to do an okay job. You do have 2 nice pieces in the backcourt, though. Anthony McComb, he's the lone guy on the roster that gives you 5+ rebounds per game, 5.2 rebounds. He's been able to supply this team with just under 15 points per game, and then Elijah Jamison, more around about 16 points per game. He's been a mid-30s 3-point shooter, but Norfolk State does have a little bit of a tough time in terms of taking care of the ball, and now they go up against an Irvine team that has actually taken a big giant step back with regards to rebounding. They're allowing teams to grab about 30% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. This is a Norfolk State team, though, that they themselves are going to give up a lot of second and third chances outside the top 210 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. So the second chances, I do think, are going to be there on both sides. And for UC Irvine, you do have one of the best shot blockers in all of college basketball. You've lost in the shadow last year with the likes of Ben Lycan and company down low, but Kyle Evans has been tremendous. 10 points, 8 rebounds, entered into yesterday with 3.1 blocks per game. And then Darren Sarin, Jerron Dixon, they entered into yesterday with a combined about 28.5 points per game, with Dixon shooting 39.5% for three. Irvine as a whole, they shoot between about 32 to 33% for three, and they're bad at the free throw line. They're shooting about 65.5% at the charity stripe, but a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They give you nothing easy inside as well. Entering into yesterday, teams were shooting less than 40% on their 2-point shots. That was a top 5 mark in all of college basketball. And you have a Norfolk State team that, if you just look at their history, this is a team that they always try to pile drive the ball down low. They really don't take a lot of threes. And Norfolk State entered in yesterday with 71.8% of their shots coming from 2-point range. That's a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. So do you think that Irvine going to go out there, dominate this game? 9 or less, want to lay it with them. 10 or more, take the points with Norfolk State. 135 or less, in on the over. 136 or higher, the under. And now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502, it's New Haven, and they're going to be on the road against Fordham. Fordham finds themselves as 11.5 point favorites. Total on this game, it is 128.5 to a 130, and I set Fordham as a 17.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay it. You've got two teams that are very content to be playing very slow and very controlled. Fordham 347th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. New Haven is 359th, and New Haven has had a few results where they've been able to hold in there. They did a nice job against Boston College, playing them to a one-possession game, but keep in mind, this was still a team that was at the Division II ranks a season ago that was sub-500, and for New Haven, you just haven't been able to find any scoring whatsoever with this team. They're well outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. You do have Jabari Fitzpatrick, who's been able to supply 13 points, 5 rebounds per game, but they also just don't have the size of a lot of Division I teams as well. New Haven has been well outside the top 225 in terms of rebound percentage. They shoot just 30% per 3. That's outside the top 3 nationally. And for Fordham, they had a little bit of a rough go of it with regards to their 3-point shooting to begin the season, but they've been able to find their bearings there, and they're playing some smart basketball. They don't get to the free throw line. They're outside the top 3 in terms of free throw attempts per possession, but they're a top 50 team in terms of not allowing free throw attempts on a per possession basis. Top 35 team in terms of their opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and this has been one of the best mid-major rebounding teams in all of college basketball, headlined by 9.5 rebounds. Rikas Schulte, who's been able to give you 12.5 points per game. Now you've got Tajur Reeves and Christian Henry playing well off of one another in the backcourt as well. A combined 9.7 assists per game now. A combined 5 turnovers between the two of them as well. But these two guys are starting to heat up from 3, especially Reeves shooting 35% from 3. Fordham still right around about 300th in the country in terms of their own 3-point shooting percentage, but it's a New Haven team that I think that their numbers are a little bit warped by the fact that they played against some non-Division I teams. Right now, New Haven 352nd in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. I think that Fordham pretty much just pounds this team into oblivion, so I did set my line at a 17.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Fordham, and I'm in on the underside by total 125.5. 306-503, 306-504. NJIT is on the road against Butler. Butler is a 32.5 point favorite total on this game. It is 148.5 to 149, and with Butler, I set them as only a 28.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with NJIT. NJIT is one of those teams that is getting absolutely nothing going on offense whatsoever. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis, a hearty 349th in all of college basketball, but much of that was due to an injury to Sebastian Robinson, their top scorer from a season ago, and he's been reacclimating, give you about 8 points per game. He only missed 3 games. He's played through injury, through a few others, but he seems to be starting to be able to get that scoring punch back. He's only been able to shoot 25% from 3-point range, but has been able to get the team at least 7 points at each of the last 5 games, so that's a positive sign for the team. And then you got David Bolden, who's been really the main man in the backcourt. 3 assists, a steal, 12 points per contest, shooting in the mid-30s for 3 for a NJIT team that is outside the top 275 in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Now, the team is just giving up way too many second and third chances outside the top 330 in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, but you do have a guy in Ari Fulton who's been able to give you a little bit over 7 boards, 11 points per game, and then you've got Malachi Arrington who's been able to step up. He's been able to give the team right around about 5.5 rebounds per game as well, and then for Butler, Michael Ajayi is going to be the best rebounder in this game. Has yet to be able to find that 3-point shooting form that he showed at Pepperdine a few years ago, but has been a double-double machine for this unit with about 17 points, a little bit over 12 rebounds per game. He'll give you a block per contest as well, but again, only shooting about 24% from 3. It's a Butler team as a whole, though. Still a top 110 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at about 35.5%. Finley Bizjack has been that main scorer, 17 points. He shoots 36% from 3, and for Butler. They're really not going to force the issue in terms of generating turnovers outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Their forte has been those second and third chances, ranking in the top 40 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and they really force you to drive the ball inside. They're a top 15 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from inside the three-point line. I do think that that's going to keep things a little bit more low scoring in this game, so that's a big reason why I did set my total at 148.5, despite the fact that Butler is a top 30 team with regards to total possessions per game. So seeing the 149.5 out there, I'm going to be in on the under, but I do think that NJIT going to be able to do just enough inside to be able to hold in there. Set my line at 28.5, so going to be taking those points with NJIT to go along with the under. 3-6-505, 3-6-506. Georgia plays host to West Georgia. West Georgia, a 35.5 to a 36.5 point dog. 161.5 to 164.5 is the total, and did set a total of 164.5. I do like the over in this ordeal. Now with West Georgia, they've actually been a much better defense when they've been away from home rather than at home. They're averaging darn near 7 points fewer per 100 possessions given up away from home rather than at home. And on the road, they're a top 25 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home. Offense has been a little bit neither here nor there, but they've elevated into the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis after last year. They were just absolutely awful, as Sheldon Williams-Dryden finally has a little bit of hope. Last year, he was pretty much the lone double-figure scorer. He's back there with 9 rebounds, 17 points, and a little bit of a steal per game, and is shooting 41% for three. West Georgia, top 150 team in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, but now you've had Chas Lulis along with Josh Smith be able to help out combined 29 points per game between the two of them, 5 assists per contest. West Georgia is going to have a tough time against a Georgia unit that is generating a bunch of turnovers. Georgia, top 30 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Georgia is a top 10 team in terms of their points scored on a per possession basis, despite the fact that they're only about 280th in 3-point shooting percentage at 31.3%. Jeremiah Wilkerson has been able to supply 37.5% 3-point shooting with 18 points per game. Blue Kane, Marcus Millender are really the lone other double-figure scorers, but you've now got 9 different guys to give you at least 5.7 points per game, so Shearing has been carrying for this team. Cannon Catchings, Sumpto, Cyrell, these guys have all been able to do a solid job, and for Georgia, they are going to give you some second and third chances. They're 185th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They themselves have been a top 125 team in terms of their overall offensive rebound percentage, and they actually lead the country in block shots per game with 8. A lot of that is because of their warp speed pace. They are currently number 3 in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for West Georgia, they're certainly playing faster than they did a season ago, up to about 76th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So I do think that the raw possessions get you over in this ordeal, but the way that West Georgia has been playing on the road, I'm going to be willing to take those points, set them as a 28.5 point dog to go along with that over. 3-6-5-7, 3-6-5-8. South Carolina State is on the road. They're facing off against South Carolina. South Carolina, a 31.5 to a 32.5 point favorite. Totals between 143.5 to a 146.5, and for the Gamecocks, I set them as a 32.5 point favorite. So willing to go up to 32. South Carolina State just has not really been doing anything well this year. I wish I could put it any other way. Honestly, they are shooting about 32% from 3-point range. They're 221st in that regard. I had to try to find a little bit of a compliment for them because it's not easy to do, but if you look at both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, it's bad. South Carolina State, 353rd in all of college basketball in that regard, and for South Carolina, they're both good at taking care of the ball and they're bad at generating turnovers. South Carolina, top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense, but they've been 52nd overall in terms of points allowed per possession, and you've got Michi Johnson back for his second tour of duty here with South Carolina, and he has been rock solid as the main scorer, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, 15 points per game on about 35% 3-point shooting. South Carolina only shooting about 30% from the outside, but they've been able to do a nice job pounding the ball inside. They've been a top 55 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, and for South Carolina, you've got Mongolian Mike giving you good versatility, 11.5 points, 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists, and then you've been able to have Grant Pollock be able to come in off the bench, be that sharpshooter at about 43% from 3, as he's the only player other than Michi Johnson that is averaging more than 3 points per game that is shooting above 30.5% from 3-point range. Flip side, you got a South Carolina State team, though, that they're turning the ball over well over 14.5 times per game. They've just been oh so sloppy with it. They do grab for themselves a few second and third chances. They've been a top 250 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they're also a bottom 30 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. They're allowing teams to grab nearly 13 offensive rebounds per game, so they've been getting dump truck there. You've had Christopher Parker be able to supply about 9.7 rebounds per game, but he's been dealing with a little bit of injury. He should be good to go in this game, and to his credit, he's given the team 36 rebounds in the last 3 games. And then the Cal State Bakersfield Roadrunner transfer Cameron Clark has been able to give you about 9.5 rebounds per game as well, so that's elevated this team down low. But your lone double-figure scorers, Owen Bronson Jr., 12.5 points, he'll shoot 39.5% from 3 for a team that has been relatively respectable with that 3-point shooting. But outside the top 355 in terms of both their opponent's 2-point shooting percentage and their own 2-point shooting percentage, with South Carolina having a little bit of a difficult time popping it from 3, but being so efficient inside, that's going to drive the ball inside. I think that that's going to allow South Carolina to really be able to pull away in this game. And you do have a South Carolina State team that traditionally they play very much up and down. They've had to dial it back a little bit with losing so many pieces. They're now about 85th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you got a South Carolina team that's more around about 223rd. So I did set my total at a 146.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with South Carolina, and at a 145.5 or less, I'm going to be in on that over. 306.509, 306.510. Texas Southern is playing us Abilene Christian. Abilene Christian, a 4 to a 4.5 point road favorite. Total on this game, it is 146.5, and with Abilene Christian, I made them the 9-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Abilene Christian continues to be one of the best teams in all of college basketball in terms of generating turnovers. That is what is tried and true with this team, as they are 25th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis and 14th in games played away from home. And Texas Southern, 312th in the country in terms of turnovers per possession. They are not shooting well from 3 at 28%. That is outside the top 330 in all of college basketball, short of them the 0.5%, 28.5% for Texas Southern. But man, this is a backcourt that is a little bit, shall we say, disjointed. You've had Dwayne Posey be able to supply about 10 points, 5 rebounds per game, and Troy Upsey, when he's been out there, he's been able to give the team a bit of pop down low, 14 points, 8 rebounds, and it's actually shooting 39.5% from the outside. But you have a team that's turned the ball over about 15.5 times per game, and as has been the case in past seasons for them, it just feels like they play a little bit too fast for their own good. It's a Texas Southern team that's right now checking in terms of total possessions per game at 34th in all of college basketball, and you had an Abilene Christian team that they like to dial it back, 260th in terms of total possessions per game, and Abilene Christian has traditionally been a team that's been a little bit rough on the glass, but I mean, they're now 77th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Their line teams only grab about 25.5% of their misses as an offensive rebound, with Braden Hubbard being the lone double-figure scorer for the team, 15.5 points. He's been able to shoot only about 31% from 3, but Abilene Christian, relatively respectable, shooting 33.8% from 3-point range at his country average. They are a team that's going to give up a little bit from the outside as well. They've been allowing teams to shoot about 36% from 3-point range, but again, Texas Southern not really going to be able to exploit that. And then you've got a lot of mix-and-match guys like Childary and Newton, along with Yanel Rivera, giving you about 9 to 9.5 points per game. They both have been able to give you a steal and out per contest, and as a matter of fact, for this bunch, you've got each of your top 4 scorers on Abilene Christian give you at least 1.5 steals per game. I think that they're going to be able to put this Texas Southern team under duress, and I do think that that defense going to be able to win out, though I do think you get just enough possessions here for the over, and you do have a Texas Southern defense that has been very inefficient with regards to their defense. Currently, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 364. So, set a total of 151. I like the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Abilene Christian. 306.511, 306.512. American is going to be on the road against Virginia, and Virginia, a sizable favorite of 26.5 points, 152.5 to 153.5 is the total, and I said American as an underdog of 24.5 points. So right now, seeing what we've got here with the 26.5, I'm going to be willing to take those points. With American, they've sped up big time from 8 seasons ago. They're up to about 176th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I mean, after about a month through the season, they were a top 75 team. They have really dialed it back. They're getting back to their roots, as last 2 seasons they were outside the top 340 in terms of total possessions per game, and I expect them to continue to slow it down. You've got Greg Jones along with Maiden Collins combining for about 24.5 points per game. Neither of these guys have been able to give you any 3-point shooting whatsoever, but the team is still above average with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage at 35.6%, thanks to someone like a Matt Mayock, who supplying 9.5 points, shooting 51% from 3. I think that there should be a little bit of regression there. Wyatt Nacetus has been able to give you about 11 points per contest. He shoots 43.5% from 3-point range, and on the flip side, you got a Virginia team that doesn't necessarily play with a lot of tempo outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. Now, they should absolutely be able to grab a bunch of second and third chances. Top 20 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and Virginia making the most out of their possessions. Top 60 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. The Diaz, the Ritter, along Jonah Grunlow are a pair of international men of mystery that have been able to combine for about 12 rebounds per game. Grunlow, 9 points, 2.7 blocks per contest. De Ritter is your top scorer of 15 points and does shoot 39.5% from 3 for a Virginia team that, as a whole, they're a top 25 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at 39.7%. Chance Mallory has been one of the main guys with 45.5% three-point shooting. He's right now supplying about 11.5 points per game along with Malik Thomas. Thomas down to only shooting about 30% from three, but that should rebound a little bit. And for this Virginia team, they've been very stout with regards to their interior defense, top 35 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but I do think that American is going to be able to exploit a Virginia team that's been relatively average with their three-point shooting defense to be able to do just enough to hold in there, and this American team has been a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So set a total of 147.5. I like the under and anything north of 25 here with American. 3-6-5-13, 3-6-5-14. Georgetown plays us to Coppin State. Coppin State, a 31.5 point underdog. Total on this game, it is 148.5. I'm going to take the points with Coppin State. I set them as a 29 point underdog. Georgetown going to be without their coach and Ed Cooley in this one. He threw the water bottle, and yeah, that made a lot of social media memes. But that said, for Coppin State, this has been a team that's been grody. They're outside the top 300 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They're getting land-based on the glass. It's a lot of not good for this team, to say the least. You don't have a single guy that gives you over 9 points per game, and DeMonterey Hall being that main guy with 8.8 points, 5.7 rebounds per game. If there's one thing they've been okay with, it's generating turnovers. Top 275 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but even with how bad everything is for Coppin State, I do think that they're going to be able to hold in there because, for one, not having Ed Cooley out there on the sidelines, that means that things might be a little bit more disjointed for a Georgetown team that they've honestly done a great job in terms of protecting the ball. Top 10 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Top two guys, KJ Lewis, Malik Mack, are combining for about 29.5 points per game. The Mack attack shoots 35% from three, but Georgetown as a whole is outside the top 300 with regards to three-point shooting percentage at 29.2%. They've been country average in terms of their two-point and three-point shooting percentage of defense. They're not necessarily dominating on the glass as Vincent Ayuchuku continues to deal with injury. Sean Harris-Smith is currently not with the program. Now, Julius Halafana has been able to step up in a big way. 12 points, 5 boards. He's a true 7-footer that has done an exceptional job down low, giving the team at least 14 points in each of the last 5 games. So he's been a nice find for them, but who else is going to be able to step up? You've got someone like an Isaiah Abraham, who's only been able to give you about 5.5 points per game, not give you a ton of rebounding. And for Georgetown, they're a relatively mid-tempo team this season. Meanwhile, it's a Coppin State team that typically is pretty slow and controlled. They've sped themselves up a little bit. Coppin State is about 170th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Georgetown more around about 183rd. And in the end, I do think that Georgetown gets a comfortable win. But again, not having Ed Cooley out there on the sidelines makes me affect things a little bit. And I do think that Coppin State finds a way to be able to get some clean possession. Semi-total 149, so at the 148.5, like the over and the points with Coppin State. 3-6-5-15, 3-6-5-16. LSU is playing us to Prairie View. Prairie View is a underdog here of 29.5 to 30 points. The this game is between 153 to 156.5, and I set a total of 165.5. I do like the over. It's a Prairie View team that's looking to gun it. They're a top 30 team in terms of total possessions per game, and when Prairie View generates a turnover, the defense is great. This is a Prairie View team that's 47th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. When they don't generate a turnover, they get gashed. 327th in opponent's three-point shooting percentage, 348th in defensive rebound percentage, as 36.3% of opponents' missed shots do result in an offensive rebound, and you've got an LSU team that is a top 25 unit in terms of points scored on a per possession basis that elevates into the top 15 when they're at home, and it's not even like they're an amazing three-point shooting team. They shoot just 33.5% from three now. That does go up to 38% in their home games, but you've had Nickel Nwoko along with Deon Thomas, both give you about 15.5 points per game. Nwoko is one of your main post players, 5.5 boards, not really going to pop it from three, but shooting over 72% from the floor. Thomas, 6.6 assists to fewer than 2 turnovers per game, so he's keeping things nice and clean. And then Markel Sutton down low, 14 points, 9 rebounds. He's shooting 34% from 3. Max McKinnon continues to shoot 47% from the outside. They're dealing with that Jalen Reed injury. That does hurt them a little bit, but for Prairie View, they've actually got a guy that's able to take over the game. That would be Terrion Joseph. He was a 20-point per game scorer 2 seasons ago over at Southern, doing the same thing this year. 21.1 points per game. Not an amazing 3-point shooter at only about 30% from the outside, but for Prairie View, they've been a little bit better with regards to their outside shooting than they have been in the past. They're getting absolutely dump trucked on the glass, so there's that aspect of things, and they continue to be outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You've had Joey Mambila when he's been out there on the floor along Doug Young be rock solid, but these two guys have dealt with injury all season long, especially Doug Young. It looks like he's going to be out for probably quite some time. He comes over from Quinnipiac. He was the guy that they were really relying upon. Meanwhile, with Mambila, he's been able to play in the last few games, and he's given the team double figures in all 3 games that he has been able to play in. So that's a nice little bit of sign of life for this team. That should be able to help out the offense. And then Dante Horn has been able to give 12.5 points. Shoots about 32% from three, generates 2.5 steals per game. But I think that LSU is going to be able to keep it clean. Just absolutely knife through this Prairie View defense. So I did set my line at a 31.5. I'm willing to lay the big number here with LSU, and I'm going to be in on the over. 36-5-17, 36-5-18. Boston College plays host to Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson hopes to be fairly priced at 17.5 to 18.5 point underdogs. 141.5 is the total, and for Fairleigh Dickinson, set them as a 19.5 point underdog. So 19 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay with Boston College. The Boston College defense honestly has not been too bad. Their 3-point shooting has been atrocious, and it's a team that is going to play at a relatively slow pace right now. They are about 249th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Fairleigh Dickinson has really dialed it back as well. Fairleigh Dickinson is typically a team that absolutely guns it, currently 181st in terms of total possessions per game, but they are 351st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For Fairleigh Dickinson, they've also taken a little bit of a different approach than in past seasons as well. Typically with Fairleigh Dickinson, it's all about guards and no big men. They've got a little bit more size on the roster, like a true 7-footer, and Cyril Martinoff has been able to give you 9 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Tashad Jackson, who began his career over at VMI, he's only about 6'4", but 8.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, and as a result, this is a team that is a little bit less explosive with their 3-point shooting. They're only shooting about 32.5% from the outside, though Eric Parnell, Noah Melson, they've been able to combine for about 21 points per game. They combine to shoot about 35% from three, but they're also allowing teams to shoot 38% from three. That is the bottom 15 mark in all of college basketball. I do think that there's a little bit of positivity doing for this Boston College team from the outside. Not necessarily a ton, but you've got a guy that's able to do it all in Donald Hand, 15 points, 5.5 boards. He's only shooting 18% from three. I think that that'll go northward. Fred Payne, Broden Kapke, these two guys shoot between 34.8 and 36% from the outside. Kapke is right around 6'11", 9.5 points, 4.5 boards. So he's been versatile. Payne, 12.5 points, 3 assists per game. And it's a Boston College team that does a nice job taking care of the ball. Top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They really don't force the issue on defense. Outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis on defense. But they have been a top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And for Boston College, to their credit, they've been a top 150 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. And I do think that those second and third chances going to be just enough to be able to get you the over. So I total 143.5, 1 to lay up to 19 with Boston College, and I'm in on the over. 306-519, 306-520. You've got Syracuse playing with Stonehill, and Stonehill is an underdog of 23.5 points, 139 to 139.5 is the total line. I said Syracuse as a 24.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Syracuse took it on the chin a little bit against Northeastern with regards to that defense, but for Syracuse, this is still a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They've really slowed things down as well. I think that the Donnie Freeman injury has had a little bit of something to play with that, but 230th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you've got a Stonehill team that they're looking to play at a relatively moderate tempo, about 200th in terms of total possessions per game, but not having the holy cross transfer in Will Bachelor out there has really been costly. He's missed each of the last 9 games, and that has caused the Stonehill team to plummet well outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they're just getting destroyed on the turnover front. They're outside the top 320 in terms of their own ball security. They're outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now, they've been fortunate in teams shooting only 62.1% the free throw line against them. That's the top mark in all of college basketball, and that's luck that should be waning soon, but you do have a Syracuse team that, man, it has been very, very rough in terms of their overall just free throw shooting. It's a Syracuse team that is currently shooting less than 60% of the free throw line. That is dead last in all of college basketball, and Syracuse has had Kion Anthony do a nice job in terms of filling in the absence of Donnie Freeman with about 11.5 points. He's only shooting, though, about 24% from three. Syracuse outside the top 300 with regards to their own 3-point shooting percentage at about 29.8%, but they should be able to absolutely win this battle down low, as Syracuse has been a top 175 team in terms of their overall post play, in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, or a top 30 team with that regard. They've been a top 10 team with regards to shot blocking as well. William Kyle, 3.3 blocks, 8.2 rebounds per game. That does warp their overall rebound numbers. They're actually outside the top 175 in terms of rebound percentage, but so you've got Nathan George doing a nice job building up 5 assists per game. Syracuse has been a top 100 team in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis. Stonehill does have a few guys still in the backcourt that have been relatively solid, in Herman Coffey along with Chad Stinson. 8.5 points, 5.5 boards, has a little bit of versatility, and is not a guy that's really going to pop it from 3. While Coffey has been a 42% 3-point shooter, and with Devontae Devontae Hackett. He's been able to hack it with about 9 points, a little bit over a steal per game, but outside those main two guys, and Herman Coffey, along with the currently injured Will Batchelor, you just don't get a lot of three-point shooting out of this team, and with Sonell doing such a bad job on the turnover front, I do think that allows Syracuse to really control the contender of this game and be able to keep things lower scoring. So I did set a total here of a 136.5. I'm willing to lay up to 24 with Syracuse, and I'm going to be in on that total under 365.21, 365.22. Florida State plays those to Jacksonville, and Jacksonville is a underdog here of 24.5 points, and your total is 156.5. Did set a total of 153.5. I'm going to take a shot here on the under. You got a Jacksonville team that has really dialed it back, and in the Coach Mincy era, typically the best Jacksonville teams have been ones that have been very rock solid on the glass, and there are typically teams that do a good job in terms of just being able to slow games down. They're getting back to that slower tempo, 268th in terms of total possessions per game, and Florida State is doing anything but that. Florida State is currently 8th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Florida State is taking over 52% of their shots from three-point range. That's a top 10 three-point shot rate in all of college basketball, but they're only shooting 31.3% from the outside, and it's a big reason why I could only set them as a 17.5-point favorite. Going to be one to take the points. Robert McRae actually transfers in from Jacksonville, and he's been a versatile player with about 14 points, 6.8 assists per game. He's only shooting, though, about 27.5% from three, and as a matter of fact, when it comes to this Florida State team, you take a look at everyone on the roster other than Jalen Crawford, who's only played in 4 games this season. You've got one player that shoots above 33.3% for three. That would be Martin Somerville. He's been able to shoot 39% for three, 8.5 points per game, and you've got a lot of producers for this team. You've got 9 different guys give you at least 14 minutes per game. They all give you at least 4.8 points per game, so they've got a lot of overall scoring, and they've done a nice job in terms of giving themselves like a chance. This top 50 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. They've been a top 50 team in terms of generating turnovers. Matter of fact, top 25 team in terms of generating turnovers. But I do think that Jacksonville is going to be able to remain lively, as they've done a solid job being a top 225 team in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis as well. And Jacksonville has been surprisingly a top 100 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage. You've got Chris Arias along with Jalen Jones combining for about 21 points per game, and between the two of them, they shoot about 39% from three-point. The rest of the team, other than Hayden Wood, really doesn't shoot it well from the outside, but it's been a whole is greater than some of its parts approach, and not a lot of second and third chances. As Donovan Rivers, it's right now the lone guy that gives you over 4 rebounds per game, 7 points, 5 boards. He's been able to do a nice job there, and for Jacksonville, I do think that they're going to have a tough time taking care of the ball. They've been outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, but way that they've been playing down low, way that they are relatively okay at guarding the three-point arc. Good teams are shooting 33.3% from three-point range against them. They're forcing teams to drive the ball a little bit more on the inside as they do a nice job on the glass. I think that that's going to be enough to be able to keep this total under and to be able to keep this Jacksonville bunch in the game. So semi-line at 17.5. We'll take those points with Jacksonville, and I'm going to be in on the under 365.23, 365.24. Mississippi Valley State is going to be on the road against West Virginia. West Virginia is a pretty Mondo-sized favorite here of 41 to 41.5 points. So this game is 135.5 to a 136. I said Mississippi Valley State as a 32-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Now, for Mississippi Valley State, it does appear as though the milk is starting to turn a little bit more sour after a really nice start to the season, and they are most likely going to be without Daniel Mayfield once again in this game. That's their top rebounder with 13.5 points, 6.5 boards, and in the last 2 games that they have played without him in the fold, it has not been pretty. They lose to Florida State 96-49, and they lose to Tarleton 88-64, but this team has been a little bit better on offense because they finally have a go-to scorer. Michael James, 20.5 points, 2.3 assists. He shoots 37% from three. Now, the team as a whole, they're still in the bottom 10 in terms of ball security, 18.5 turnovers per game, and they shoot 28.5% from three. But James has been relatively solid, and this continues to be a team that absolutely gives it up on the defensive side of things, outside the top 350 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, you've got a West Virginia team that's outside the top 335 in terms of their total possessions per game. They like to play slow and controlled, and this has been a top 15 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They generate nearly 14 turnovers per game, which with that slow pace, that's a top 75 mark in terms of turnovers per possession. And Tracy Eaglestaff, after a little bit of a slow start to the season, he's starting to get it going with his scoring. He's had a combined 28 points in the last 2 games. Additionally, they had Chance Moore out of the lineup for the first few games of the season. He's come back to be able to give the team 12 points, 6 boards. Doesn't necessarily shoot it well from three, but team overall shoots about 35% from three, with Honorov shooting 42% from the outside. He's managed to supply 18 points per game. Brendan Lorient, he's been a guy that followed on over from North Texas, as he had a few of the guys follow Russ Hodge on over from the previous stop. Jasper Floyd being another one of them. Floyd, 8 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, a little bit over a steal per game. Lorient, pair of assists, 6 boards, 11 points per game, and has been a solid 36% three-point shooter as well. And this should be a game where West Virginia wins very easily. You've got Harlan Obiana, the true 7-footer, should be able to dominate down low, especially with the injuries to Mississippi Valley State, 6 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, but that said, I do think that Mississippi Valley State does just enough with their offense to hold in there, and you've got a Mississippi Valley State team that all of a sudden they have been looking to gun it with regards to their tempo. They're up to about 35th in terms of total possessions per game, so set a total of 140. I like the over and the points here with the Delta Devils. 306, 525, 306, 526. You've got a high point, open to not be a low point at home against Bryant. Bryant is an underdog of 16.5 points, 154.5 is the total, and with high point, I set them as a 24.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I just really don't know what Bryant is doing a good job of. Like, this is a team that's well outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Bryant has had to dial back their tempo. They're about 317th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. It's not even like it's a great defense. They're about 192nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They might be doing a relatively okay job of being able to guard the 3-point line, but they're also allowing quite a few easy looks on the inside as well, because this is not necessarily a great rebounding team. And for Bryant, I do think that they're going to really struggle here. Now, for Bryant, they have been able to get a little bit more out of the former top 150 recruit that has come over from Chicago State and made a nice little bit of an impact, as Quincy Allen is supplying about 10 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, and he's able to shoot about 30% from 3. I would think that that would go northward a little bit for a team that's shooting 29.4% from the outside. That's been relatively grody, but again, with this Bryant team outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers per possession on offense, outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense, or outside the top 3 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, and High Point should absolutely be able to just take them down here, and High Point has been much better in terms of generating turnovers this year as well. They're a top 25 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. High Point playing with a little bit more tempo than in past years as well. High Point has traditionally actually been a relatively slow and controlled team. High Point now up to about 105th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but that offensive efficiency, so they're a top 30 team in terms of points per possession, with Cameron Fletcher supplying 17 points, shooting in the mid-30s from 3. Chase Johnson, he pretty much does one thing, and that's pop it from 3, but he's shooting 44% from 3. Scary Terry Anderson shoots 45% from the outside, 13 points per game. Weapons upon weapons. It's a High Point team that's been a top 150 team with regards to their own rebound percentage, and they've done a pretty solid job with regards to shooting percentages as well. Unlike a lot of teams that gamble for turnovers, they're not getting completely bludgeoned from the outside. They're about a country average team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and that should be enough for High Point to be able to get the job done in what I think is going to be a solid up and down game. I set my total at 154.5. Right now I'm seeing a 154 out there. That's my max buy point on the over, but a buy point on the over, and one to lay with here with High Point, set them as 24.5 point favorite. 36-527, 36-528. Alabama State is on the road against Memphis. Memphis is a favorite of 17.5 to 18.5 points, and total on this game you're going to be getting it between 146 to 147, and this had a total of a 155.5. I do like the over. You got an Alabama State team that's looking to play with some pace. 137th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Memphis has dialed it back a little bit from past seasons, about 71st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Memphis once again doing a poor job of taking care of the ball. That was costly for them against Mississippi State a few days ago. They're outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, but they're also a top 40 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They are rebounding well over 33% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, with Doug McDaniel right now being the lone double-figure scorer on the team. 14 points, 5 assists, 2.2 steals per game. He's only shooting about 31% from 3. Curtis Givens has actually been your top 3-point shooter, and this is a Memphis team that I think is going to be better on offense when it's all said and done, because Givens missed 5 games. He's been able to supply 9.5 points per game. He was their top scorer in that loss against Mississippi State. Hassan Abdul-Hakim, he missed 6 games. He's been able to give the team about 9 points. He's shooting less than 30% from 3 right now. That should be able to elevate as the season goes along. And Aaron Bradshaw was just completely useless towards the beginning part of the season. He's been more than completely useless here recently, so yay, verily there. Now, could only set my line at 17.5. If we could get to an 18 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Alabama State. I'm seeing some 18.5s for Alabama State. Last year, they were a top 10 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Now they're more country average in terms of taking care of the ball, and they do allow a lot of open looks from 3 outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but they themselves have been able to shoot about 36% from 3. As John Anderson and Micah Simpson have been a really good tandem out there in the backcourt. These two guys are combining for about 33.5 points per game. Simpson shoots 38% from 3 between the two of them, 6.8 assists per game. Now, between the two of them, a little bit over 6 turnovers per game, but this is not a Memphis team that's really going to put you under too much duress in terms of generating turnovers. They're a top 175 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're neither here nor there. And then you've had Aquarius Standback for this Alabama State team really do a nice job down low. 5 boards, 2.2 blocks, 7.5 points per game. Now it is a team that's outside the top 275 with their opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, but with the team grabbing a few second and third chances, I do think that you get a higher scoring expose in this game, and Alabama State outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So made a total of 155.5, like the over, and at 18 plus one, take the points with Alabama State. 36-5-29, 36-5-30. Texas, they are back to being a big favorite as they're at home against Maryland Eastern Shore. And with the Shore there, a underdog of 33.5 points out on this game. It is 140.5, and for Texas, I set them as a 30.5 point favorite. So you're at 33. I'm going to be willing to take those points. Maryland Eastern Shore, a bottom 10 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. But for Maryland Eastern Shore, they have not been the world's worst team in terms of being able to hold up on the defensive side of things. They've been a top 275 team in terms of their just points allowed on a per possession basis. And in a road/neutral court environment, they've been a top 175 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now they are getting just absolutely nothing on the inside with regards to their offense. They don't have a single guy in the roster that's giving you at least 5 rebounds per game. They're about 232nd in the country with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. In terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, it's even worse than that. So you do have your issues there, and you do have a Texas team that has been very good in terms of taking care of the ball. Now, Texas is not going to put you under too much stress, so that should lead to some more clean possessions for this bunch. And for Texas, they're about 61st in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but if you separate it out for home games and home games only, they do fall in the top 25 with that regard. And for Texas, you just expect a little bit more out of Trayvon Mark. It's not that Mark has been completely terrible this year, but he's only been able to give the team about 11 points, 2.5 assists per game, and is shooting less than 30% for 3. You expect that average to go northward. And for Texas, they're only shooting about 34.5% for 3. That's right around country average. They're doing a better job, though, in terms of generating second and third chances than I think a lot of people anticipated. Dalen Swain, who comes over from Xavier, along with Sean Miller and Mateus Volkaitis, they've both been able to give you between 6.5 and 7 rebounds per game apiece. Between the two of them, nearly 4 offensive rebounds per game, and Volkaitis and Swain both give you 15 points per contest. You've been able to get good production out of Jordan Pope from the outside, shooting 37% for 3, 12.5 points, 3 assists per game. And for this Texas team, they are outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So that means that for Maryland Eastern Shore, a few more clean looks for a guy like a Joseph Lusardo, who's been able to supply about 11.5 points per game, 4 boards, and he shoots 43% from 3. The rest of the team is grody. They're shooting as a collective 28.8% from 3-point range, and they're outside the top 320 in terms of their overall free throw shooting percentage. Texas really not going to put you on the free throw line too much, so not as much of a concern there. But I do think that for Maryland Eastern Shore, the defense is actually going to be just enough for them to hold in there. And I do think that with Maryland Eastern Shore, they're going to really slow this game down, as they are one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, 338th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So I set a total here of a 134.5. I like the under, and at anything above 31, going to be willing to take those points with the Shore. 36-5-31, 36-5-32. You've got Arizona playing against Bethune-Cookman, and Cookman an underdog of 39 to 39.5 points. 150 to 151 is the total, and made a total of 155. I'm going to be in on the over. You got a Bethune-Cookman team that's right now 345th in the country in terms of points allowed on per possession basis. The defense has really just gone on them, and they're a relatively mid-tempo team. Bethune-Cookman about 190th in terms of total possessions per game. We got an Arizona team that's obviously playing fast, not quite as fast as in past years. 102nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but they still have just done a great job in terms of executing their stuff. They're a top 25 team in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They're absolutely dominating on the glass, with Toby Awaka off the bench giving you 10.6 rebounds per game. And right now for this Arizona squad, it's just really good balance. You've got 7 different guys between 8.3 and 14 points per game. Koa Pete has been the main scorer with 14 points per game, but he really hasn't been the main guy recently. We've seen Braden Burris and Jaden Bradley in the backcourt step up with 13.5 points per game apiece. Bradley's right now shooting 50% from 3. I think that there's going to be a little bit of regression there, but these two guys also combine for about 3.3 steals per game. And for Bethune-Cookman, they have taken some gross losses. They lost by over 65 points a few days ago against St. Louis. I do think that they're going to pick it up, and I just feel like the talent of this roster is honestly a little bit too much. Even with Dr. Bradley and Reggie Ward currently out of the fold, you've got the Heedy brothers, as Jacoby Heedy is right now that top scorer at steal and a half, 16 points per game, shooting 47% from 3, and then Quinn Heedy shoots 36.5% from the outside, 10 points per game. This team is about 180th with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, and then you had Ontario Morris, a former top 25 recruit, 12.5 points, 3 assists, 2.2 steals, just a little bit of a do-it-all guy, though. They need him to shoot a bit better than 22% from 3 in Arizona. They're a solid but not amazing three-point shooting team at about 37%, but at home that goes up north of 40%. I do think that both of these teams are going to knock down some shots, and Bethune-Cookman is going to lose this game by a lot, but I set my line at 35. I think that they do just enough to hold in there, even with Daniel Ruzon, only giving you about 4.5 to 5 rebounds per game, so I'm going to be willing to take those points with Bethune-Cookman, and I'm in on the over, and wrap things up with 306-5-33, 306-5-34. It is Oklahoma, and they're going to be playing against Stetson. Stetson is an underdog of 29.5 to 30.5 points, 148.5 is the total line. I set a total here of a 156.5. I'm going to be in on the over. You got a Stetson team that has not been able to do a great job with regards to their defense, and this is a team that just does not have a lot inside there. 288th in all of college basketball with regards to their two-point shooting percentage. In terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, it's even worse at 326th. That said, I do think that this team is going to be able to step up to the plate a little bit more in this game against an Oklahoma team that they do have a kryptonite of just allowing it from three-point range. Oklahoma right now about 135th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they are letting teams shoot over 36% from three. Like Oklahoma last year was actually a top 25 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They are outside the top 320 right now, and that's the one thing that the Stetson team does a relatively okay job of. They're able to bomb it from three-point range, as right now they're shooting about 33.5% as a collective, and they do like to be able to take those threes. They are taking over 44% of their shots from distance. Ethan Copeland has been the main man, shooting 44% for three, 13 points per game. J.B. Phillips, 3 assists, 15 points per contest, 5.5 rebounds. He has seen his three-point shooting percentage dip below 30%. I do think that that'll be going northward as the season goes along. Alex Soyle has been a little bit up and down, only about 5 points per game, but he does shoot 43% from the outside as well. For Stetson, need to clean up the turnovers. They're outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, and this is a Stetson team that they do a nice job in terms of not getting their shots blocked. They're a top 15 team in all of college basketball in that regard, but they're also outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage as well. And it's a Stetson team that typically when they fired on all cylinders, they've been a slower team, and they've dialed it back once again this year. 278th in terms of total possessions per game. You've had a relatively mid-tempo Oklahoma team. They're about 139th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for Oklahoma, they've been a top 75 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. Muhammad Wagyu has been able to step up with about 7.5 to 8 rebounds per game. You've been able to have the backcourt of Nigel Pack and Xavier Brown do a nice job leading the way in the backcourt, combined 31.5 points per game. And Pack, he packs it in at 47% three-point shooting. Team is about country average with about 33.5% three-point shooting themselves, but they keep things clean as they only turn the ball over about 9.5 times per game, a top 25 mark in all of college basketball. But giving up those threes, I think, is going to be just enough for Stetson to be able to hold in there, and I do think that you get a game which is going to be involving a lot of scoring, with Stetson being incredibly inefficient on the defensive side of things. So I did set my total at 156.5. I do like the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the points here with Stetson, and that'll wrap things up for the Monday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to Paul Fritschner. He does great work with the Rebound Rundown Podcast. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is by Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So, per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I am with you guys every single day on this podcast with picks and analysis on every game every day. So, I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.